Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into a time machine and witness the birth of a terrifying new power, one that required us to strip away our only natural defense. Imagine, we are 6 million years deep in the past, standing in the heart of a dense, steaming jungle in what will arguably become Africa. The air is thick enough to chew on, smelling of wet earth and crushed fruit. But look down at your arms. You won't recognize them. They aren't the smooth, vulnerable skin you're used to washing in the shower. They are covered in a thick, matted layer of coarse fur. You are an ape, a primate ancestor, and you are perfectly designed for this world of shadows and leaves. But through the canopy, a harsh, unfamiliar light is piercing through. The forest is thinning. The world is drying out. And that fur coat, the one that has kept your ancestors alive for millions of years, is about to become a death sentence. Over the next few million years, you are going to do something no other primate has ever dared to do. You are going to take off your armor. You will trade your fur for a strange, leaky cooling system that will force you to hunt, to invent, and to speak. But it comes at a cost. You will become the most vulnerable creature on the savannah, a soft, naked snack for every predator with teeth. So why did we do it? Was it for sex? For speed? Or did we just get infested with too many bugs? And how did losing our hair inadvertently give us the power to conquer the planet? Thanks to modern genetics and some clever fossil detective work, tonight we will venture into these prehistoric depths together to find the answers. Frankly, if you were dropped here today without your clothes, you wouldn't survive a single night. The mosquitoes alone would probably carry you off. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. That small click sends a big signal to the algorithm. That long-form, serious educational content still matters. And to me, it's an incredibly meaningful show of support. Thank you so much for helping keep this channel going strong. It always fascinates me to see where you're all tuning in from. Let me know in the comments where you are in the world and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing on a thick branch 60 feet above the forest floor. It is the late Miocene epoch. If you check your GPS, you're somewhere near the Great Rift Valley. But right now, it's just home. You take a deep breath. The air is heavy, saturated with humidity and the chaotic noise of 1,000 unseen insects. Run your hand over your chest. You don't feel skin. You feel a dense, reassuring carpet of hair. It's dark, maybe reddish-brown or black, and it's everywhere. It covers your back, your legs, your arms, right up to your jawline. This isn't the polite body hair modern humans try to shave off before a beach trip. This is a functional, heavy-duty survival suit. And honestly, it feels fantastic. You see, in this environment, fur is your best friend. You spend your days crashing through thick undergrowth, swinging from rough bark and sliding down vine-tangled trunks. Without this fur, your skin would be a map of cuts, scrapes, and infections within an hour. The fur takes the abuse, so you don't have to. It's your armor. But it's more than just a shield against physical damage. It's your personal climate control. At night, when the tropical sun vanishes and the temperature drops, you don't have a blanket. You don't have fire. You have this coat. The individual hairs trap a layer of air right against your skin, warmed by your body heat. It's a boundary layer, a microscopic force field of insulation that keeps you from shivering your calories away while you sleep huddled in the crook of a tree. And let's not forget the bugs. The jungle is absolutely teeming with things that want to bite, sting, or burrow into you. But try biting through a dense mat of fur. It's difficult. Most mosquitoes get lost in the forest of your arm hair before they can even find the skin. You are, for all intents and purposes, wearing a permanent hazmat suit. But the most important function of this coat isn't physical, it's social. Look over to the next branch. There's a member of your troop sitting quietly, waiting. You move over. You start to run your fingers through their fur. You pick out a piece of dried mud, maybe a tick that got lucky, or a tangled burr. This is grooming. In your world, grooming is the currency of peace. It's how you apologize for stealing a piece of fruit earlier. It's how you secure an ally in case a fight breaks out later. The sensation of fingers combing through fur releases a flood of endorphins in the brain, both for the groomer and the groomee. It lowers your heart rate. It builds trust. Without fur, this entire social mechanism falls apart. You can't groom a naked shoulder the same way. There's nothing to sort through, nothing to fix. The time you spend picking through this coat is the glue holding your society together. Scientists looking back at this era, studying fossils like Sahelanthropus chadensis or Ardipithecus ramidus, generally agree that for millions of years, this was the status quo. We were hairy, we were happy, and we stayed in the shade. We didn't need to be fast, and we didn't need to be cool. We just needed to be insulated. But shift your weight on the branch. Look out toward the horizon. Something is wrong. The endless ocean of green treetops is starting to look patchy. The earth is cooling. The tectonic plates beneath your feet are shifting, pushing the land up, disrupting the rain patterns. The lush, continuous rainforest that has cradled your ancestors is beginning to break apart. Gaps are appearing. Wide open spaces of tall grass and scrubland are invading your sanctuary. To get from one patch of fruit trees to the next, you can't just swing through the canopy anymore. You have to go down. You have to descend to the floor. And out there, in those open spaces, there is no shade. As you peer down into those sun-drenched corridors of grass, you feel a prickle of unease under your heavy coat. Down there, the sun hits the ground with hammered force. Down there, your fur, your armor, your blanket, your social network is going to start doing something it was never designed to do. It's going to start cooking you alive. You don't know it yet, but the great drying has begun, and the coat that saved you in the cool, shady trees is about to become your greatest liability. You are about to face an evolutionary ultimatum: strip down or die out. You hesitate for a moment, gripping the rough bark of your sanctuary, before you commit. With a grunt, you drop from the lowest branch and land on the forest floor with a soft thud. Welcome to the ground. It's different down here. Up in the penthouse suites of the canopy, the air was moving, filtered by layers of leaves. Down here, the air is still and stagnant. But the real problem isn't the air, it's the commute. Because the forest has broken apart into what paleoecologists call a mosaic environment, a patchwork quilt of dense woodland separated by expanding stretches of open savanna, your grocery store has moved. The fruit trees you rely on are no longer a continuous buffet line. To get breakfast, you now have to walk across these sun-blasted gaps. So, you start walking. You trudge out of the shade and into the full glare of the Pliocene sun. Immediately you realize a massive design flaw in your biology. That fur coat, the one that was so cozy 10 minutes ago, has suddenly turned into a torture device. Here is the physics of your misery. Fur works by trapping air. It creates a dead air space between the outer hairs and your skin. In the cold, this is brilliant because your body heat warms that trapped air, and the fur keeps the wind from stealing it away. It's exactly how a high-end down puffer jacket works. But in direct sunlight, this mechanism backfires spectacularly. As the tropical sun beats down on your dark back, the outer layer of your fur absorbs that solar radiation. It heats up. Normally, a breeze might strip that heat away, but your fur is too thick. It traps the solar heat and your body heat in that dead air space. You are essentially walking around inside a thermos that has been left on a radiator. To make matters worse, you have to move. Every time your muscles contract to take a step, they generate heat. In fact, muscles are terribly inefficient engines. For every bit of energy they use to move you forward, they produce about 4 times as much energy as pure waste heat. So you are generating heat from the inside, absorbing heat from the outside, and you are wrapped in a blanket that refuses to let any of it go. This is where the activity budget comes into play. It's a concept anthropologists love to argue about. Basically, you have a limited amount of time you can be active before you hit a thermal wall. If your body temperature rises just a few degrees, you risk heat stroke. So you have to stop. You have to find shade. You have to pant like a dog. While you sit there panting, wasting daylight, the predators are watching. They don't mind the heat as much because they are mostly nocturnal or ambush hunters who sleep during the hottest part of the day. But you're stuck. You're a prisoner of your own coat. Now, there is a fascinating debate among experts about the timing of this thermal crisis. Historians and biologists still argue whether we lost our fur before we fully committed to life on the ground, or if the ground life forced the fur off. One camp suggests that the shift to the savanna was so brutal that only the mutants with thinner hair survived to reproduce. The other camp argues that maybe we started losing fur in the trees first, perhaps due to a change in parasites or sexual selection, which then allowed us to colonize the savanna. It's a classic chicken and egg scenario, but with more hair and sweating. But let's look at the reality of your situation right now. You are likely an Australopithecus at this point. You are walking on 2 legs, sort of, but you are still heavily furred. You are crossing a patch of grassland to get to a grove of fig trees. The temperature in the direct sun is pushing 100 degrees Fahrenheit, about 38 degrees Celsius. You feel the heat building up in your core. It's a claustrophobic sensation, like being trapped in a crowded elevator wearing a wool suit in July. You feel lethargic. Your brain feels fuzzy. This is the danger zone. If you don't cool down, your proteins will start to denature, literally cooking like egg whites in a pan. Nature, in its infinite wisdom, has given you a very specific set of tools to deal with this. You can pant, which expels hot air from your lungs, or you can find a rock to hide under. That's about it. You don't sweat, at least not in a way that matters. Your skin is covered in apocrine glands, which produce a thick, oily, foamy substance. It's great for making you smell distinct and slicking down your fur. But for cooling? It's practically useless. It doesn't evaporate fast enough to dump the heat load you are carrying. So, you trudge on, overheating, vulnerable, and probably a bit grumpy. You look at the gazelles bounding across the plains. They have fur, too, but they have a trick you don't. They have a special system in their noses to cool the blood going to their brains, allowing them to tolerate higher body temperatures. You don't have that. You have a big, sensitive brain that demands a constant, cool temperature. You are an evolutionary contradiction, a tropical primate trying to become a savanna walker while wearing a winter coat. Something has to give. You need a way to minimize the sun hitting you, and you need a way to dump the heat you're generating. The first solution you stumble upon isn't biological, it's geometrical. You realize that if you stop walking on all fours and stand all the way up, fully upright, the sun doesn't hit your whole back anymore. It mostly just hits your head and shoulders. It's a simple shift in posture, but it's going to buy you just enough thermal credit to survive the next chapter. You pull yourself up to your full height, straightening your spine and balancing precariously on your hind legs. You are now officially bipedal. Most people think we stood up to free our hands, to carry tools, babies, or weapons. And sure, that was a nice bonus. But according to a brilliant idea known as the Wheeler Hypothesis, standing up was actually your first major air conditioning hack. Think about the geometry of the savannah at high noon. The sun is directly overhead, acting like a laser beam of heat. If you are down on all fours, knuckle-walking like a chimp, your entire back is exposed to that radiation. That is a massive surface area soaking up solar energy. It's like laying a solar panel flat on the ground. You catch every single photon. But the moment you stand up, you change the angle. You turn that solar panel sideways. Suddenly, the only parts of you directly exposed to the sun are the top of your head and your shoulders. The rest of your body, your chest, your stomach, your legs, is now in the vertical shade of your own silhouette. By simply standing up, you have reduced the amount of solar radiation hitting your body by up to 60%. That is a massive thermal saving. It's the difference between standing in a frying pan and standing next to it. But the benefits of standing up go beyond just dodging the sun. There is also the wind. Down on the ground, friction slows the air movement. The grass blocks the breeze. The air right next to the soil is stagnant and radiates the heat absorbed by the earth. It can be significantly hotter at ankle height than it is at eye level. By lifting your torso 3 or 4 feet off the ground, you are elevating your core organs into a cooler microclimate. You are moving your engine out of the furnace and into the breeze. The wind speed is higher up here, and the air temperature is lower. This convection helps strip away some of the heat clinging to your fur. So, there you are, an Australopithecus, standing tall in the grass, feeling a little cooler, a little more capable. You can travel further now during the heat of the day than you could on all fours. You've bought yourself a few extra degrees of safety. But there is a catch. Standing up is a band-aid, not a cure. You are still wearing the coat. Even with your clever posture, once you start moving, really moving, the internal heat builds up again. You can walk, sure, but you can't run. If a leopard bursts out of the tall grass, you can sprint for maybe 30 seconds before your internal temperature spikes into the danger zone. You are still limited by that thick, insulating layer that refuses to let your metabolic heat escape. And this brings us to the most critical, high-stakes poker game in human evolution. It's all happening inside your skull. You see, evolution is trying to do something ambitious with your lineage. It wants to build a bigger brain. The brain you have right now is decent, about the size of a chimp's, maybe 400 to 500 cubic centimeters. But the survival pressures of this complex new world are demanding more computing power. You need to remember where the water holes are, track the seasonal migrations of animals, and navigate the complex social politics of your troop. You need an upgrade. But brains are expensive, not just in terms of calories, though they are calorie hogs, but in terms of heat. Your brain is the most metabolically active organ in your body. It is a biological furnace. Even when you are just sitting there thinking about a rock, your brain is burning glucose and generating heat. As you scale that brain up, making it larger and more complex, it produces exponentially more heat. This creates a terrifying thermal ceiling. There is a strict limit to how hot a mammalian brain can get before it shuts down. We call it the thermal limit. If the blood rushing into your brain is too hot, the neurons stop firing correctly. You get confused, dizzy, and eventually you collapse. If it gets hotter still, the proteins in your brain cells unravel and you die. So here is the trap. You need a bigger brain to survive the savannah. But a bigger brain generates more heat. To dissipate that heat, you need to dump it through your skin. But your skin is covered in a fur coat designed to keep heat in. You are hitting a biological wall. You cannot evolve a larger brain because you cannot cool it down. It's like trying to put a Ferrari engine inside a car with the radiator of a lawnmower wrapped in a wool blanket. The engine will melt the car before you get out of the driveway. Something has to go. The physics are non-negotiable. If you want the supercomputer, you have to tear down the insulation. This is the moment the scales tip. The evolutionary pressure shifts from stay warm at night to stay cool while thinking. The selection for a bigger brain becomes locked in a death grip with the selection for naked skin. You can't have one without the other. But shedding that fur isn't just about unlocking brain size. It's about to unlock a new way of eating, one that requires you to do the impossible, chase down an animal that is twice as fast as you in the heat of the day until it drops dead from exhaustion. Let's pause and really look at this engine problem, because it is the fundamental constraint of your existence. The brain is arguably the most sensitive piece of machinery in the known universe. It demands a very specific operating environment. While your muscles can tolerate a fair amount of abuse, they can work while starved of oxygen, they can tear and rebuild, they can function in a wide range of temperatures. Your brain is a diva. It needs a constant supply of glucose, a precise pressure of oxygen, and, crucially, a stable temperature of around 37 degrees Celsius, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Deviate from that temperature by just a few degrees, and the system crashes. At 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, you are in heat exhaustion. At 42 degrees Celsius, 107 degrees Fahrenheit, you are in heat stroke, and permanent brain damage begins. At 44 degrees Celsius, 111 degrees Fahrenheit, death is almost certain. Now, consider the animals around you on the savannah. Look at the cheetah. It has a relatively small brain compared to its body size. It can sprint at 70 miles per hour, generating an insane amount of metabolic heat in seconds. But it can only do this for about a minute. If it doesn't catch the gazelle in that burst, it has to stop. It has to lie down in the shade and pant for half an hour to bring its core temperature back down. Its brain is protected by a specialized network of blood vessels called the rete mirabile, miraculous net, which acts like a car's heat exchanger, cooling the blood before it enters the skull. You, the developing hominid, do not have this miraculous net. Your blood flows from your hot body straight up your carotid arteries into your brain. If your body is hot, your brain is hot. This means your endurance is strictly tied to your ability to cool your whole body. As long as you are covered in fur, your body acts like a heat trap. If you tried to grow a modern human brain, 3 times the size of a chimp's, while keeping that chimp-like fur coat, you would overheat just by walking around on a sunny day. You wouldn't be able to think, let alone hunt. The constraint is brutal. You are stuck with a small brain because you are wearing a sweater. This is the brain radiator problem. To upgrade the processor, you need a better cooling system. You need to turn your entire skin surface into a radiator. But evolution doesn't just wake up one day and say, "Let's shave this monkey." It works through trade-offs. Losing fur is risky. Without it, you are exposed to UV radiation, scratches, and cold. So, the benefit of losing it must be massive. It has to be worth the risk of freezing to death at night or getting skin cancer. What could possibly be worth that risk? Calories. Massive, dense, easy to digest calories. See, up until now, you've been a vegetarian. You've been eating fruits, tubers, maybe some termites. It's a low-energy diet that requires a huge gut to digest all that fiber. But the savannah is offering a new menu: meat. The savannah is full of giant herbivores, mammoths, wildebeests, giant buffalo. They are walking packages of protein and fat. If you can eat them, you can shrink your gut, which is also an energy hog, and channel all that spare energy into growing your brain. It's the perfect feedback loop. Meat fuels the brain. The brain figures out how to get more meat. But there is a catch. Those walking meat packages are fast. They are alert. And they have giant horns. You are slow, weak, and have no claws. So how does a slow, weak, furless ape catch a gazelle? You can't ambush them like a lion. You don't have the camouflage or the explosive speed. You can't outrun them like a cheetah. But you have one thing they don't. You are starting to develop a cooling system that doesn't rely on panting. You are starting to sweat. And this allows you to do something terrifying. You can run, not fast, but forever. You are about to enter the niche of the persistence hunter. And to do this, that fur has to go. It's not just holding your brain back anymore, it's holding your dinner back. The evolutionary ultimatum has shifted. It's no longer just lose the coat or keep a small brain. It is now lose the coat or starve. You are now Homo erectus. The time is roughly 1.9 million years ago. You look different. You are taller, leggier. Your rib cage has lost the cone shape of an ape and looks more like a barrel, balancing your torso over your hips. But the biggest change is your appetite. You are hungry, not for figs or berries, but for fat. The brain inside your skull is growing, demanding nearly 20% of your total resting energy. To feed it, you need high-density fuel. You need meat. The problem is the meat is currently attached to a wildebeest grazing 300 yards away. Let's analyze the tactical situation. That wildebeest can sprint at 50 miles per hour. You, on your best day, might hit 20 miles per hour for a few seconds. In a sprint, you lose 100% of the time. If you try to sneak up on it, the herd's 1,000 eyes and ears will spot you long before you get within spearing range. You have no bow and arrow. That technology is 1,000,000 years in the future. You have a sharpened stick and a rock. So how do you kill it? You use the hunter's gamble. You don't try to beat the animal at its own game. You force it to play yours. The strategy relies on a fundamental flaw in the biology of most quadrupeds, four-legged animals. It's called the respiratory locomotor coupling. When a four-legged animal runs, its breathing is tied to its stride. As its front legs hit the ground, the impact drives the guts forward, compressing the lungs and forcing air out. As it pushes off, the guts slide back, pulling air in. One stride, one breath. They cannot decouple this. They cannot pant while they gallop. This means that to cool down, they must stop running. They have to stand still, open their mouths, and pant rapidly to exchange hot air for cool air. If they are forced to keep running without stopping, their body heat has nowhere to go. It builds up. You, however, are bipedal. Your chest is free from the impact of your front legs. You can breathe as fast or as slow as you want, regardless of how fast you are running. You have uncoupled breathing from movement. This gives you the tactical edge. You don't need to be faster than the wildebeest. You just need to be relentless. Here is the plan. You find a single animal. You spook it. It sprints away, leaving you in the dust. You don't panic. You just start jogging after it. You track its hoofprints. You find it again a mile away, resting in the shade, trying to pant, trying to cool down. You appear on the horizon. The wildebeest sees you. It has to run again. It sprints. Its temperature rises another degree. You keep jogging. You find it again. It runs again. You are not racing it. You are overheating it. You are forcing it to run on a fever. But there is a critical component to this strategy that brings us back to your skin. To make this work, you have to be able to run for hours in the midday heat without overheating yourself. If you still had that thick fur coat of your ancestors, this strategy would be suicide. You would cook your own brain long before the wildebeest collapsed. The Savannah Hypothesis argues that this specific pressure, the need to dump massive amounts of heat while running a marathon in the tropical sun, is what finally stripped us naked. Scavenging dead carcasses was a good start, but it wasn't reliable. To secure a steady supply of brain food, we had to become predators. And since we lacked claws, fangs, or speed, we turned our bodies into the ultimate endurance machines. We traded the sprint for the marathon. We traded the ambush for the chase. And to survive the chase, we had to shed the coat. Picture the chase. It is high noon on the African savanna. The sun is a white hole in the sky, baking the earth until the air shimmers. Most predators, the lions, the leopards, the hyenas, are asleep, panting in the deepest shade they can find. Only a madman would be out moving in this heat. But there you are, Homo erectus. You are jogging. A rhythmic loping trot that eats up the miles. Your target, a large kudu bull, is up ahead. He is visibly distressed. His tongue is lolling out, thick with foam. His sides are heaving. Every time he stops to gasp for air, to try and dump the lethal heat building in his blood, you appear. You don't sprint. You don't scream. You just keep coming. This is the physics of persistence hunting, and it is a brutal, mathematical equation of thermodynamics. The kudu has a fur coat. It's thin. Sure. Adapted for the heat, but it's still insulation. As he runs, his muscles generate massive amounts of waste heat. Because he is galloping, he cannot pant effectively. His only way to cool down is to stop. But you are denying him that biological necessity. You are forcing his engine to run in the red zone, minute after minute, hour after hour. Now, look at yourself. You are running the same distance under the same sun. Your muscles are generating the same heat. But you are not overheating. Why? Because you have broken the mammalian rulebook. You have stripped away the insulation. Your skin is bare, exposed directly to the air. But more importantly, your skin is wet. You are glistening. A sheen of water covers your chest, your back, your forehead. This isn't just water. It's a high-performance coolant. As the air rushes past your moving body, it hits this moisture. The water molecules absorb your body heat and launch themselves into the atmosphere, taking that heat with them. This is evaporative cooling, and it is shockingly efficient. While the kudu is trapping heat under its fur, you are shedding it into the wind. If you were still wearing the thick coat of your Australopithecus ancestors, this hunt would have ended hours ago with you face down in the dirt. Fur blocks the wind from reaching the skin. It creates a dead zone of humid, hot air right against the body. If you sweat under heavy fur, the sweat just sits there. It soaks the hair, making it heavy and matted, but it doesn't evaporate efficiently because the air can't get to it. You would literally boil in your own juices. But because you are naked, the wind you create by running becomes your cooling fan. The faster you run, up to a point, the more wind you generate, and the more heat you can dump. You have turned your entire body surface into a radiator. This is the secret weapon of the human species. We are not the fastest. We are not the strongest. But we are the only animal on the planet that can run a marathon in 90-degree heat without dying. The kudu stumbles. It's not injured. It's not out of energy. It is suffering from hypothermia. Its brain is cooking. Its legs buckle. It collapses into the dust, unable to rise. You trot up to it. You are tired, yes. You are thirsty, definitely. But you are not overheated. Your brain is cool and functioning. You raise your spear. You didn't kill this animal with your muscles. You killed it with your sweat glands. You ran it down using the unique thermal advantage of your naked skin. This moment, standing over the prey that will feed your family and fuel your evolving brain, is the proof of concept. The trade-off worked. The loss of fur wasn't a loss at all. It was the acquisition of a superpower. Let's take a breath. Probably a much deeper, calmer breath than that kudu you just outran, and look at the technology that just saved your life. We tend to think of sweat as a nuisance. In modern society, we spend billions of dollars trying to stop it, hide it, or mask the smell of it. We treat it like a biological error. But standing there on the Pleistocene savanna, glistening in the sun, you are witnessing the deployment of the most advanced cooling system nature has ever devised. You didn't just lose your fur, you completely overhauled your plumbing. To understand how radical this is, we have to look at the old you. Back when you were a hairy ape in the trees, your skin was covered mostly in apocrine glands. These are the glands attached to hair follicles. They produce a thick, oily, milky substance. It doesn't evaporate very well. Its main job isn't to cool you down, it's to coat the hair and, crucially, to smell. It's a chemical billboard for your identity, your stress levels, and your reproductive status. In the animal kingdom, this is standard equipment. But as you evolved into the naked runner, you pushed those apocrine glands into retirement. You relegated them to a few specific areas, mostly your armpits and your groin, where they still act as scent broadcasters today, which explains why body odor is concentrated there. In their place, you covered your body in eccrine glands. These are the heroes of our story. Unlike the oily apocrine glands, eccrine glands are not attached to hair follicles. They open directly onto the surface of the skin, and they pump out a clear, watery, salty liquid. You have between 2 and 5 million of these microscopic hydrants embedded in your skin. No other primate comes close to this density. A chimpanzee has them, but they are fewer and far between, mostly on the palms and soles for grip. You have turned them into a full-body suit. Here is the chemistry of why this works, and it's actually quite beautiful. Water has a high heat of vaporization. This means it takes a massive amount of energy to turn liquid water into gas, water vapor. When you sweat, that water sits on your hot skin. To evaporate, it needs energy. It steals that energy in the form of heat directly from your blood. When the water molecule finally launches itself into the air as a gas, it takes that heat with it, leaving your skin cooler. It is a literal transfer of thermal energy from your core to the atmosphere. But for this to work, the water has to be directly on the skin, and the air has to touch it. If you had fur, the sweat would wick up the hairs and evaporate off the tips, which is useless because it's not pulling heat from your skin anymore. It would just be wet fur. By stripping the skin bare, you maximized the surface area for this phase change reaction. Now you might be thinking, wait, don't horses sweat? They run and they have fur. This is a great point, and it's the kind of thing evolutionary biologists love to pick apart. Yes, horses sweat. If you've ever seen a racehorse after a derby, it looks like someone poured a bucket of soap on it. That's the difference. Because horses still have a coat, their sweat contains a protein called lathyrin. It acts like a detergent, breaking the surface tension of the water so it can spread out through the fur and wet the skin rather than beading up. It creates a white foam. It works, but it's messy and less efficient. A horse relies heavily on respiratory cooling, panting, to supplement this. You, on the other hand, don't need latherine. You don't need foam. You have the direct-to-air interface. You can dump heat at a rate that is frankly aerodynamic. We are, biologically speaking, the sweatiest animals on Earth. In extreme heat, a human can sweat up to 10 to 12 liters of water a day. We can sustain a sweat rate of nearly 2 liters per hour during a marathon hunt. That is a staggering amount of fluid turnover. We are essentially walking water-cooling towers. Historians and physiologists still argue about the exact timeline of when the equine takeover happened, largely because sweat glands don't leave fossils. But the genetic evidence suggests it happened in tandem with the hair loss. It was a package deal. You couldn't have the naked skin without the sweat, or you'd burn. And you couldn't have the sweat without the naked skin, or you'd be a soggy, matted mess. So, the next time you're stuck on a crowded train in the summer, or stepping out of a gym and you feel that trickle running down your back, don't be disgusted. That is the feeling of survival. That is the sensation of your brain being protected from the thermal limits of the universe. But there is a dark side to this superpower. You have turned yourself into a high-performance machine, but high-performance machines are thirsty. By relying on water for cooling, you have created a new, deadly dependency. You have just tethered your species to the river. Now, before we get too carried away celebrating our sleek, aerodynamic, sweat-cooled bodies, I need to burst your bubble. I need to tell you a slightly uncomfortable truth about the skin you're living in. You aren't actually naked. If you were to take a high-powered magnifying glass and look closely at your arm, or your cheek, or even your forehead, you would see that you are not a hairless ape at all. You are covered in fur. Technically speaking, humans have roughly the same density of hair follicles per square inch of skin as a chimpanzee. If you were to count them up, you'd find about 5 million hair follicles across your body. You are, biologically, just as hairy as your ancestors who were swinging through the trees. The only difference is the type of hair those factories are producing. This is the distinction between terminal hair and vellus hair. Your ancestors and modern chimps are covered in terminal hair. This is thick, pigmented, long, and deeply rooted. It's the kind of hair you still have on your head, your eyebrows, and, well, a few other places we'll get to later. It provides serious insulation and protection. But on the rest of your body, that smooth expanse of chest, back, and legs, your follicles underwent a radical downsizing. They switched production to vellus hair. Vellus hair is incredibly fine, usually unpigmented, transparent, and very short. It's what we call peach fuzz. So the great shedding wasn't really a shedding at all. We didn't lose the machinery. We just changed the product line. Evolution didn't tear down the factory. It just recalibrated the settings. This is a brilliant example of how evolution often works. It rarely invents something from scratch if it can just tweak what's already there. Deleting 5 million follicles would require a massive genetic rewrite of the skin's architecture. But simply telling those follicles, "Hey, stop growing the hair after 2 millimeters and don't add any color," is a much simpler genetic command. Geneticists believe this change was driven by a shift in gene regulation. It's like a dimmer switch. In a chimp, the hair growth dimmer is turned up to 10. In a human, on most of the body, it's dialed down to 1. The machinery is humming, the follicle is alive, but it's producing a ghost of a hair. Why does this matter? Because Vellus hair is the perfect compromise. It's small enough that it doesn't trap heat. It doesn't create that insulating boundary layer of dead air we talked about earlier. It allows the air to reach the skin surface directly, which permits that life-saving evaporation of sweat. But because the follicles are still there, they help stabilize the sweat droplets. Some scientists argue that these tiny hairs act like wicks, helping to spread the moisture across the skin surface rather than letting it just drip off uselessly. So, you are essentially wearing a suit of invisible fur that is optimized for cooling. This brings us back to the feedback loop. In evolutionary biology, things rarely happen in a vacuum. One change triggers another, which reinforces the first. Think about the chain reaction we've uncovered so far. A random mutation or variation creates hominids with finer, shorter body hair. In the jungle, these individuals might have been at a disadvantage. Colder at night, more scratches from branches. But as the environment shifted to the hot, dry savanna, the rules changed. Those individuals with the Vellus mutation could sweat more efficiently. Because they could sweat better, they could run longer. Because they could run longer, they were the only ones who could successfully execute a persistence hunt. This meant they were the ones bringing home the high-calorie meat. Meat means protein and fat. Protein and fat mean you can afford to grow a larger, more energy-expensive brain. A larger brain makes you a smarter hunter, which leads to more meat, which leads to even better survival rates for your naked offspring. It is a virtuous cycle of hairlessness and intelligence. The less hair we had, the smarter we could afford to become. It's fascinating to think that the massive computer inside your skull, the one allowing you to understand the concept of history and physics right now, might have been paid for by the miniaturization of your body hair. If we had kept the coat, we would have kept the small brain. We would still be panting in the shade, waiting for the sun to go down. But as with every great leap forward, there is a price to pay. We optimized our bodies for heat dissipation, relying entirely on this water-based cooling system. We became the ultimate runners, the ultimate sweaters, and the ultimate thinkers. But in doing so, we created a biological machine that burns through fluid at a terrifying rate. You can survive weeks without food, but without water, in the heat of the Pleistocene, you are dead in hours. And that brings us to the hydration leash. By losing our fur and turning on the taps, we inadvertently enslaved ourselves to the waterhole. So, you have successfully hacked your biology. You are a hairless, sweating, persistence-hunting machine. You can run down a kudu at noon while the lions are hiding in the bushes. You are the master of the thermal domain. But every superpower comes with a bill attached, and yours is due immediately. The cost of your high-performance cooling system is liquid. To keep your brain at that safe 98.6 degrees while running under the African sun, you are burning through your body's water reserves at a suicidal rate. During a heavy persistence hunt, you can sweat out up to 2 liters of water per hour. That is 4 standard water bottles, gone every 60 minutes. You are literally venting your blood volume into the atmosphere to stay cool. This creates a new, terrifying vulnerability known as the hydration leash. Most savanna animals are incredibly water efficient. The camel, the champion of this discipline, can lose 25% of its body weight in water and keep walking. It has evolved specialized kidneys, oval-shaped red blood cells that keep flowing even when the blood turns to sludge, and a coat that reflects the sun to minimize sweating. It can go days, even weeks, without a drink. You are physiologically fragile. If you lose just 2% of your body weight in water, your performance tanks. Your focus blurs, your endurance crashes. At 10%, you are in medical shock. At 15%, you are dead. And unlike the camel, you have no fur to shield you from the solar radiation that drives this thirst. You are an open system, constantly leaking fluid. This means that for the first million years of your naked existence, you were on a short leash. You could never stray too far from a river, a lake, or a reliable watering hole. Your range was dictated by the radius of your thirst. If you chased a wounded antelope 20 miles into the dry scrub, you might catch it, but you might also die of dehydration on the walk back. This biological limitation forced a behavioral revolution. You had to become a planner. You couldn't just wander aimlessly like a grazer. You had to map the landscape in your mind. There is a spring in that valley. There is a muddy pool under those baobabs. Your survival depended on a mental database of hydration points. But then, something clicked. A spark of genius that was just as important as the discovery of fire or the sharpening of stone. You realized that if you couldn't stay near the river, you had to bring the river with you. We don't know exactly when it happened because the materials, animal bladders, hollowed-out gourds, sealed skins, don't survive in the fossil record. But historians and archaeologists argue that the invention of the water container was the technology that finally cut the leash. It allowed humans to expand out of the river valleys and conquer the deep, arid interior of the continents. Shutterstock. We do have hard evidence from later periods. In the Diepkloof rock shelter in South Africa, researchers found fragments of ostrich eggshells dating back 60,000 years. These weren't just trash. They were engraved with geometric patterns and had holes drilled in the top. They were canteens. A single ostrich egg can hold about a liter of water. It was durable, portable, and sealable with a plug of grass or beeswax. This was the first external organ. You essentially built an external bladder to compensate for your biological deficiency. With a clutch of water-filled eggs slung in a net bag over your shoulder, you were suddenly free. You could chase that kudu for 3 days if you had to. You could cross the desert to see what was on the other side. You could separate yourself from the source. But there is a quirky, slightly baffling glitch in our software that persists to this day. Physiologists call it voluntary dehydration. Even when we have water available, and even when we are thirsty, humans are terrible at drinking enough to replace what we lose during intense activity. If you run a marathon today, even with water stations every mile, you will likely finish the race dehydrated. It's as if our thirst mechanism didn't quite evolve fast enough to keep up with our sweating capacity. We are the only animal that will sweat itself into a deficit while holding a full water bottle. So picture yourself back on that Pleistocene plain. You have made the kill. You are standing over the prize. The sun is hammering down. Your skin is dry because you've stopped sweating. A dangerous sign. Your head is pounding. You reach for the rough, heavy gourd tied to your waist. You pull the stopper. The water is warm, tasting slightly of earth and the animal skin it's stored in. But as you tip it back, you aren't just drinking. You are refueling the machine. You are resetting the timer on your survival. You have solved the heat problem with sweat, and you have solved the water problem with tools. But there is another reason you might have stripped off that fur coat. A reason that has nothing to do with heat, and everything to do with the microscopic monsters living in your bed. It's time to talk about the itch. Let's step away from the blazing sun for a moment and crawl into the shade. In fact, let's crawl into your bed. Imagine it's night. You are huddled in a crude nest of woven grass and branches, maybe tucked under a rock overhang or in a shallow cave. You are tired from the hunt. You close your eyes, but you can't sleep. Something is moving on you. You feel a tiny tickling vibration near your ear, then a sharp prick on your shoulder. Then an intense, burning itch on your lower back that you can't quite reach. You scratch, digging your dirty fingernails into your thick fur. But the itch moves. It's everywhere. You are not alone in this coat. You are a walking ecosystem for thousands of uninvited guests. This brings us to the second major contender in the mystery of our nakedness, the Parasite Hypothesis. While the cooling theory is all about thermodynamics and running, the Parasite theory is about hygiene and misery. It suggests that we didn't strip off our fur to run marathons. We stripped it off because we were absolutely infested. Let's look at the suspects. Ectoparasites, creatures that live on the outside of your body, love fur. Ticks, lice, and biting flies view a thick coat of hair as a 5-star hotel. It provides them with everything they need: protection from the wind, a stable temperature, a jungle gym to climb on so they don't fall off, and a hidden buffet of blood right beneath their feet. In the wild, parasites are not just an annoyance, they are a massive biological tax. A heavy infestation of ticks can drain enough blood to cause severe anemia, making you weak and lethargic. Ticks carry debilitating diseases like Lyme, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and relapsing fever. Fleas carry plague. Botflies lay eggs that hatch into larvae which burrow under your skin. If you are a solitary animal, like an orangutan, this isn't too bad. You move around a lot, you don't sleep in the same nest twice, and you leave your parasites behind. But humans, or rather early hominids, started doing something dangerous. We started settling down. We began using home bases. We returned to the same sleeping sites night after night. We piled up soft grass and leaves to make bedding. From a comfort perspective, this was an upgrade. From a hygiene perspective, it was a catastrophe. A permanent nest is a parasite incubator. The fleas and ticks fall off you while you sleep, lay their eggs in your bedding, and then happily jump back on you, or your children, the next night. By living in groups and reusing nests, we created a continuous cycle of reinfection. We were creating a parasite paradise. The energy cost of fighting these things is enormous. Your immune system has to work overtime to combat the pathogens they inject. You lose sleep from the constant itching. You spend hours of your day grooming yourself and others, trying to pick them out. So nature offered a radical solution. If you can't clean the carpet, throw it out. Get rid of the fur. Think about it from the tick's perspective. A hairless human body is a hostile wasteland. There is nothing to grip. There is no shade. If a tick lands on your bare shoulder, it is instantly exposed to the sun, the wind, and, most importantly, your eyes. You can see it. You can feel it crawling on your skin immediately because the sensory nerves aren't muffled by hair. You can flick it off before it bites. By losing our fur, We drastically reduced the parasite load. We broke the life cycle. We made ourselves slippery and uninhabitable. There is compelling evidence for this in the animal kingdom. Look at the naked mole rat. It lives in crowded underground colonies, the perfect environment for spreading lice. It is completely hairless. Look at the elephant and the rhino. They are prone to ticks, but their lack of hair allows them to deal with it by wallowing in mud, which suffocates the bugs. If they had fur, the mud wouldn't reach the skin. This theory also aligns perfectly with our behavior. We are the only primates that sleep in beds, and we are the only primates that are naked. It's likely that the pressure of disease was just as strong as the pressure of heat. If the cooling hypothesis is the carrot, you get to hunt better. The parasite hypothesis is the stick. You stop dying of tick fever. But there is a twist. If we lost our fur to get rid of lice, why do we still have hair on our heads? And why, ironically, is the human head the one place where lice still thrive today? Head lice have specially evolved claws designed to grip the cylindrical shaft of human hair. They are the last refugees of a conquered empire. They are clinging to the reservation we left for them. The fact that they exist at all proves that our ancestors did have fur, and the fact that they are now stuck on our scalps proves that we aggressively evicted them from everywhere else. So, imagine the relief. The transition from a matted, itchy, bug-ridden coat to smooth, clean skin. The itch subsides. The sores heal. You sleep better. Your children are healthier. But as you stand there, parasite-free and cooling in the breeze, you realize something else has changed. Your skin is now visible. It's no longer hidden under a rug. It's on display. And in the animal kingdom, whenever something is put on display, it inevitably becomes about one thing: sex. You see, Darwin himself wasn't a fan of the cooling theory or the parasite theory. He looked at the naked human body and didn't see a radiator or a bug-repellent system. He saw a billboard. He believed we lost our fur for the same reason a peacock grew a tail, to impress a mate. So you've ditched the fur to dump heat, and you've kept it off to keep the lice away. You are a cool, clean, high-performance hominid. But Charles Darwin, the father of evolution himself, wasn't entirely convinced by the sweaty runner story or the itchy nest theory. When he looked at the naked human skin, he saw something else entirely. He saw a flirtation device. Darwin devoted a huge chunk of his book, The Descent of Man, to the idea of sexual selection. This is the evolutionary force that explains things that make no survival sense, like the peacock's tail. A peacock's tail is heavy, it's useless for flying, and it essentially screams, "Eat me," to every tiger in the jungle. But the peahens love it. So, the tail stays. Darwin argued that human hairlessness might be our version of the peacock's tail. Here is the logic. In a world where everyone is wearing a thick, shaggy coat, it is very easy to hide your flaws. You could be suffering from a nasty skin infection, carrying a load of ticks, or even be slightly malnourished, and a good thick coat would conceal a lot of that. Fur is a mask. But naked skin. Naked skin is a truthful billboard. Imagine you are standing in a clearing, looking for a mate. You see two potential partners. One is covered in patchy, matted fur. You can't really see what's going on underneath. The other has smooth, bare, glowing skin. That bare skin is broadcasting a high-fidelity signal about that individual's biological quality. If they had ticks, you would see the bites. If they had a fungal infection, you would see the rash. If they were anemic or sick, their skin tone would be pale or sallow. By stripping off the coat, you are effectively saying, "Look at me. I have nothing to hide. My immune system is so powerful that I can walk around exposed to the elements and parasites and still look this good." In evolutionary terms, this is what we call an honest signal. It's a signal that is impossible to fake. You can't fake clear skin. You either have the genes and the health to maintain it, or you don't. So the theory goes that at some point in our history, our ancestors started preferring mates with less hair. Maybe it started as a hygiene thing. That one looks cleaner. But it quickly spiraled into a runaway selection effect. If the hairless ones got more mates, they had more babies. Those babies inherited the less hair genes and the preference for less hair instinct. Within a few thousand generations, the population shifts. We didn't just lose our fur, we bred it out of ourselves because we found the alternative sexier. This theory also attempts to explain one of the most obvious differences in human biology: sexual dimorphism. Generally speaking, across almost all populations, human females have less body hair and lighter vellus hair than human males. If the cooling hypothesis was the only reason we lost fur, this wouldn't make much sense. Women who biologically carry more subcutaneous fat for pregnancy would arguably need more cooling mechanisms, not fewer, or at least the exact same amount. But if sexual selection is driving the bus, it explains the split. If males were selecting females based on signs of youth and fertility, and if hairlessness is associated with youth, since children are naturally less hairy than adults, then males would consistently pick the less hairy females. This is linked to the concept of neoteny, the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. It's why we find big eyes and small noses cute. Smooth, hairless skin is a juvenile trait. Conversely, females might have selected males who retained some hair, like beards or chest hair, as a sign of sexual maturity and testosterone dominance. It's a complex dance of genetic preferences that pushed the genders into slightly different grooming standards. However, modern anthropologists generally agree that sexual selection probably wasn't the primary cause. It's unlikely we stripped naked just to look good, especially given the risks of sunburn and freezing. The runner's heat and the parasite load were likely the initial triggers. But, and this is a big but, sexual selection is likely why we stayed naked and why the trait became so extreme. Once the fur started thinning for cooling reasons, sexual preference likely hit the accelerator. It took a survival trait and turned it into a beauty standard. It polished the rough work of natural selection. So when you look in the mirror and worry about your complexion, you are tapping into a deeply ancient anxiety. You are checking your billboard. You are making sure your signal is clear. But while the Savannah runners and the romantic poets are arguing over heat and beauty, there is a third group of theorists standing in the corner, wearing wetsuits. They have looked at our naked skin, our layer of body fat, and the way we hold our breath. And they have come to a radically different conclusion. They think we didn't lose our fur on the savannah at all. They think we washed it off in the ocean. Now, we are going to leave the dry, dusty savannah behind and take a detour to the beach. Because there is a group of rebels in the scientific community, well, mostly on the fringes of it, who think the story of the sweaty runner and the sexy naked ape is complete nonsense. They look at your body, your weird, soft layer of fat, your hairless skin, your nose that points down, and they don't see a creature built for running marathons in the heat. They see a creature built for swimming. Welcome to the Aquatic Ape Theory. This is the rock and roll outlier of human evolution theories. It was first quietly proposed by a marine biologist named Sir Alister Hardy in the 1960s, but it was really blown into the mainstream by a Welsh screenwriter named Elaine Morgan. Morgan looked at the male-dominated Man the Hunter narrative, which was all about aggressive males spearing things on the plains, and said, "I don't buy it." She looked for a different explanation, one that accounted for the softer, aquatic features of the human body. The theory asks a simple, provocative question. What if, during that mysterious gap in the fossil record between the apes and the early humans, we didn't go to the grasslands? What if we went to the water? Imagine the scene. The Great Rift Valley isn't just drying out. It's flooding. The sea levels are fluctuating. Your ancestors find themselves trapped on islands or coastal wetlands. The easy fruit is gone. The savannah is full of terrifying predators. But the water is full of shellfish, crabs, and nutrient-rich seaweed. To get that food, you have to wade. You have to dive. You have to become semi-aquatic. Now look at your body through this watery lens, and suddenly things start to look very suspicious. First, consider your insulation. All other land primates, chimps, gorillas, monkeys, store their fat deep inside their bodies, around their organs. Visceral fat. They are lean on the outside. You, however, are wrapped in a layer of subcutaneous fat. This is fat stored directly under the skin, all over your body. Who else does this? Whales, walruses, seals, manatees. In the water, fur is a liability. Wet fur is heavy. It creates drag. Worst of all, once fur gets soaked, the air pockets collapse, and it loses its insulating power. You freeze. But a layer of blubber? Blubber is waterproof insulation. The aquatic ape proponents argue that we lost our fur to become streamlined and grew this fat layer to keep warm in the water, just like a dolphin. Next, look at your breathing. Remember how we talked about the respiratory-locomotor coupling in dogs and horses? They breathe automatically when they run. They can't really control it. But you? You can take a deep breath and hold it. You can control your glottis. This is voluntary breath control. It is essential for diving. If you couldn't hold your breath on command, you would drown the moment you put your face underwater. We are the only primates that can do this with such precision. It's also the biological prerequisite for speech, which is just controlled exhalation. But the theory argues we evolved it first for diving, not talking. Then there is the diving reflex. If I dunk your face in cold water right now, your heart rate will instantly drop. Your blood will shunt away from your limbs and concentrate in your brain and heart to conserve oxygen. This is a classic marine mammal adaptation. We have it. Chimps don't. And let's not forget the little things. Spread your fingers. Look at the base of them. In most people, there is a small flap of skin connecting the digits. A tiny web. Is this a remnant of a flipper? Look at your nose. The nostrils point downward. In most apes, they point forward. A downward nose keeps water out when you swim forward or dive. Even the way our hair grows seems to follow the flow of water. The hair tracts on our back don't point down like a dog's. They angle diagonally, in a pattern that matches the flow of water over a swimming body. It's a compelling, almost hypnotic story, isn't it? It solves everything. Why are we naked? Because wet fur is useless. Why are we fat? Because the water was cold. Why do we walk upright? To keep our heads above water while wading for clams. Why do we have big brains? Because we were eating massive amounts of brain-building omega-3 fatty acids from seafood, arguably the best diet available in the Pleistocene. For decades, this theory has persisted in the public imagination. It feels intuitive. We love water. We flock to beaches. We pay extra for ocean views. Babies can instinctively hold their breath underwater. It feels like a lost memory of a time when we were the mer apes of the African coast. But before you go out and buy a trident, we need to apply some rigorous scientific scrutiny. Because while the Aquatic Ape Theory is a beautiful story that explains the what, it fails spectacularly when you look for the where and the when. The paleontologists are standing on the shore, crossing their arms and shaking their heads. They have some bones to pick with this waterlogged idea. I hate to be the one to drain the pool, but we have to look at the Aquatic Ape Theory with the cold, hard gaze of a paleontologist. Because as romantic and logical as the mer ape story sounds, it falls apart the moment you try to fit it into the actual timeline of human history. The first and most glaring problem is the silence of the bones. If our ancestors spent 2 or 3 million years wading, swimming, and diving enough to lose their fur and re-engineer their entire physiology, they should have left some evidence behind. We should find their fossils in ancient coastal deposits or river deltas. We should see skeletal adaptations for swimming, maybe a widening of the pelvis for stabilization in water, or a shortening of the limbs for better propulsion. But we don't! Every significant fossil of our ancestors, from Australopithecus to Homo erectus, has been found in what was, at the time, a woodland or a savanna. We find them next to antelope bones, not shark teeth. Their skeletons are clearly specialized for one thing: walking and running on dry land. The feet are arched for shock absorption on hard ground. The knees are locking. These are not the features of a swimmer. They are the features of a hiker. Then there is the crocodile problem. The Aquatic Ape Theory suggests that wading into African waterways was a safe haven from the lions on the savannah. But have you ever seen an African river? It is arguably the most dangerous zip code on the continent. Crocodiles are ambush predators that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years because they are perfect killing machines. Hippos are territorial nightmares. For a slow, soft, defenseless ape to adopt a lifestyle that involves wading for shellfish in the Pleistocene Rift Valley, they would need to be suicidal. The water wasn't a refuge. It was a buffet. The selective pressure there wouldn't be lose your fur to swim faster. It would be don't go in the water or you will be eaten immediately. And what about that layer of fat? The aquatic ape defenders say it's blubber, but biologists point out that subcutaneous fat isn't unique to marine mammals. Plenty of terrestrial animals have it: badgers, pigs, bears, and even hibernating squirrels. It's not necessarily for insulation against cold water. It's an energy savings account. Humans have expensive brains and unpredictable food sources. Storing energy as fat under the skin, rather than just around the organs, is a great way to carry emergency calories without impeding muscle movement. It's a backpack of fuel, not a wetsuit. Furthermore, there is the temperature issue. The waterways in tropical Africa are warm, tepid really. They aren't the freezing North Atlantic. They wouldn't drive the evolution of a thick, insulating fat layer to replace fur. In fact, if we were truly aquatic, losing our fur would be a terrible idea unless we became massive. Water sucks heat away from the body 25 times faster than air. To survive without fur in water, you need to be whale-sized or have truly massive blubber. Humans are skinny and small. In water, a naked human becomes hypothermic very quickly. Our nakedness is actually a terrible design for an aquatic life. But the nail in the coffin for the aquatic ape theory is the very thing we talked about earlier: sweat. Remember, we are the sweatiest animals on Earth. We dump liters of water to cool down. This system only works in air. You cannot sweat underwater. Evaporative cooling is physically impossible when you are submerged. If we evolved to be aquatic, why would we develop a cooling system that is completely useless in water? And why would we develop a dependency on drinking fresh water if we were living in a saline coastal environment? The sweaty runner model explains every aspect of our physiology: the long legs, the glute muscles, the sweat glands, the thirst. The aquatic ape model only explains the fat and the breath control, and it ignores the rest. So, what about the breath control? Why can we hold our breath if not for diving? Most evolutionary biologists believe this is a classic case of convergent evolution. We didn't learn to control our breath to swim. We likely learned it to speak. Complex language requires the ability to regulate the flow of air over the vocal cords with extreme precision. You need to be able to hold a lungful of air and release it in tiny, controlled bursts to make consonants and vowels. The side effect of this speech hardware is that we can also hold our breath underwater. It's a happy accident, not the primary function. And those pruny fingers? For years, people thought the wrinkling of wet skin was just osmosis, water swelling the skin cells. But recent studies show it's actually a nervous system reaction. The blood vessels constrict to pull the skin tight, creating channels. Aquatic ape fans screamed, "Aha! It's for gripping slippery river rocks!" And they were half right. It is for grip. But studies show it works just as well for gripping wet tree branches or tools during a rainstorm. It's an adaptation for handling wet objects, which is useful in a rainforest just as much as a river. So, while the aquatic ape theory is a fun, cinematic idea that refuses to die on the internet, scientifically, it doesn't hold water. It's a just-so story, a narrative that fits the facts retroactively but fails the predictive tests. We are not fallen angels who crawled out of the sea. We are children of the sun. We were forged in the heat, on the hard, dry ground. But this brings us back to the consequences of that heat. We've established that we lost our fur to survive the Savannah sun. But by stripping off our protection, we exposed our pale, fragile skin to a bombardment of UV radiation that should have killed us. We had solved the overheating problem, but we had created a radiation problem. And to solve that, we had to change colors. You are standing on the equator. It is high noon. You are hairless. And if you are picturing yourself as you are now, you might be missing a critical detail about your skin. When our ancestors first lost their heavy fur coats, the skin underneath was almost certainly pale. Look at a chimpanzee today. Beneath that black hair, the skin on its torso is pinkish white. It doesn't need pigment there because the hair blocks the sun. So, when the first naked hominids emerged, they were essentially pale-skinned creatures walking into a solar oven. This was a medical catastrophe. Without fur, the ultraviolet UV radiation from the tropical sun hammered their skin cells. Within hours, they would have suffered severe sunburns, blistering, peeling, agonizing burns. In the wild, a severe sunburn isn't just uncomfortable, it's debilitating. It leads to infection, fever, and dehydration. You can't hunt if your skin is sloughing off. But the immediate burn was just the surface problem. The deeper threat was DNA damage. UV radiation is a mutagen. It smashes into the nuclei of your skin cells and scrambles the genetic code. This leads to skin cancer. Now, evolution is usually slow to fix problems like cancer because cancer often kills you after you've already had kids. If you die at 50, evolution doesn't care. You've already passed on your genes. However, the pressure here was so intense that nature had to intervene fast. It didn't just need a sunscreen, it needed a shield. Enter the molecule eumelanin. Melanin is a pigment produced by special cells called melanocytes in the bottom layer of your skin. It comes in different types, but eumelanin is the dark brown-black variety. It is incredibly good at absorbing UV radiation. Think of melanin as a tiny chemical umbrella. When UV light hits your skin, the melanocytes pump out these little packets of pigment. The pigment moves into the surrounding skin cells and arranges itself specifically over the nucleus, like a parasol protecting the precious DNA inside. It absorbs the UV energy and dissipates it harmlessly as heat. In the intense glare of the African Pleistocene, those early humans with a genetic mutation that produced more eumelanin had a massive advantage. They didn't burn. They didn't get infected sores. They kept hunting. They survived. This is where the genetics get really cool. Scientists have tracked a specific gene called MC1R, melanocortin-1 receptor. This gene controls the switch for pigmentation. In modern Africans, this gene is incredibly conserved, meaning it has barely changed in over 1 million years. This lack of variation tells us that there was intense, selective pressure to keep it that way. Any mutation that made the skin lighter was ruthlessly weeded out by the sun. Geneticists have actually dated when this gene swept through the human population. The estimate? Around 1.2 million years ago. This timing is the smoking gun. It lines up perfectly with the fossil evidence for when we started running and sweating, and when we likely lost our fur. So, the original skin color of the human species, the default setting for our naked bodies, is black. For over 1 million years, all humans were black. It wasn't a racial marker, it was a survival suit. It was the necessary biological armor that allowed us to exist without fur. But here is where the story gets complicated. We usually think of dark skin as protection against skin cancer, but as I mentioned, cancer kills you slowly. Evolution prefers to solve problems that kill you quickly. There was a hidden killer in the sunlight, something much faster and more dangerous to the survival of the species than cancer. It wasn't attacking your skin cells, it was attacking your unborn children. The sun was destroying a vital nutrient in your blood called folate. And this chemical warfare between the sun and your vitamins is what truly locked dark skin into our genetic code. So we have established that dark skin evolved as a shield. But what exactly was it shielding? For a long time, scientists thought it was just about skin cancer. But in the 1970s, researchers discovered something disturbing. They found that strong sunlight doesn't just burn skin. It actually penetrates into the blood vessels circulating beneath the surface and destroys a crucial nutrient called folate, vitamin B9. Folate is the fuel for cellular division. You need it to make new DNA. It is absolutely critical for rapid growth. And do you know who needs rapid growth more than anyone else? A developing fetus. If a pregnant woman has low levels of folate, the consequences are catastrophic. It leads to severe birth defects known as neural tube defects, things like spina bifida, where the spine fails to close properly. In prehistoric times, this was almost always fatal for the baby. But it's not just women. In men, sunlight-induced folate destruction can wreck sperm production, leading to infertility. This is an evolutionary emergency. Unlike skin cancer, which might kill you in your 40s after you've already raised a family, folate destruction prevents you from having a family in the first place. It is a reproductive dead end. So, the pressure to maintain dark, melanin-rich skin in the tropics was overwhelming. The melanin blocked the UV radiation, preserving the folate in the blood, ensuring that babies were born healthy. It was a perfect system. But then, humans started to move. About 60,000 to 100,000 years ago, bands of these dark-skinned, hairless, sweat-cooling hunters walked out of Africa. They migrated into Europe and Asia, and as they moved north, the environment changed. The sun got weaker. The days got shorter. The angle of the light became oblique, and suddenly the shield that had saved them became a liability. This brings us to the vitamin D tug-of-war. While UV radiation is the villain that destroys folate, it is also the hero that creates vitamin D. Your skin is a solar panel. When UV light hits a form of cholesterol in your skin, it converts it into pre-vitamin D. You need vitamin D to absorb calcium. Without it, your bones become soft and brittle, a condition called rickets. In women, rickets can deform the pelvis, making childbirth impossible. In Africa, the sun is so intense that even with dark skin blocking 95% of the UV, enough light gets through to make plenty of vitamin D. But in cloudy northern Europe, dark skin blocks too much. It works too well. The immigrants arriving in these low-light latitudes couldn't make enough vitamin D. Their bones weakened, their immune systems faltered. So the evolutionary pressure flipped. To survive in the north, you needed to let the light in. Those individuals with random mutations for lighter skin, less melanin, had an advantage. Their paler skin allowed the weak northern sun to penetrate deeper, synthesizing just enough vitamin D to keep their bones strong, while the risk of folate destruction was low because the sun wasn't strong enough to burn it away. Over thousands of years, this created the beautiful gradient of human skin tones we see today. It is not a race map, it is a latitude map. It is a perfect chemical balancing act. If you live near the equator, you need the shield, dark skin, to protect your folate. If you live near the poles, you need the window, light skin, to make your vitamin D. This entire spectrum of color is a direct consequence of losing our fur. If we were still covered in hair like a chimp, our skin color wouldn't matter. The fur would block the sun regardless of where we lived. But because we stripped naked, our skin had to become the primary interface with the solar system. But as these early humans pushed north, facing weaker sun and biting winds, they encountered another problem, one that couldn't be solved by changing skin color. It was the cold. We had built a body designed to dump heat, a body that was essentially a leaky radiator. And now we were walking into the Ice Age. You are now a master of the day. You have the sweat glands to run down prey, the dark skin to shield your DNA, and the water containers to travel for miles. But as the sun dips below the horizon and the African sky turns a bruised purple, your superpower vanishes. The temperature plummets. In the arid savanna, the lack of humidity means the earth holds no heat. It can be 100 degrees at noon and drop to near freezing by 3 a.m. And here you are, the naked ape, standing in the dark without a coat. This is the cold night paradox. We spent millions of years evolving a body that is an absolute genius at dumping heat. We stripped off the insulation, thinned out the hair, and installed a water cooling system. That is brilliant for noon. It is a disaster for midnight. Biologically, you have become a thermal liability. A chimpanzee can sleep in a tree, wrapped in its own fur, and maintain its body temperature with minimal effort. Its lower critical temperature, the point where the body has to start burning extra calories just to stay warm, is much lower than yours. For a naked human, that threshold is shockingly high. If the air temperature drops below roughly 78 degrees Fahrenheit, 25 degrees Celsius, and you are naked and inactive, you start to get cold. Below 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius, you are uncomfortable. Below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius, without shelter or covering, you are entering the early stages of hypothermia. In the Pleistocene, this wasn't just uncomfortable, it was expensive. Your body has to turn on its internal furnace. You shiver. Shivering is your muscles vibrating to generate waste heat. It works, but it burns calories like crazy. You just spent all day chasing a wildebeest to get those calories. If you spend all night shivering them away, you are running a metabolic deficit. You will starve to death while sleeping. So how did we survive those first million years of nakedness before we had fancy clothes or reliable fire? We turned to each other. We invented the human pile. If you look at puppies or kittens, they sleep in a heap. They share body heat. Primates do this too, but for humans, it became a survival necessity. Losing our fur forced us to become physically closer. We had to sleep in tight, skin-to-skin contact to create a collective thermal mass. This likely had a profound effect on our social bonding. You cannot be aggressive or distant with someone you need to spoon with to survive the night. The cold night forced a level of intimacy and trust that reinforced the social glue of the tribe. But huddling only gets you so far. As humans pushed out of the tropics and into the chillier latitudes of Europe and Asia, territories ruled by woolly mammoths and ice sheets, body heat wasn't enough. We were tropical animals trying to conquer the freezer. We needed a substitute for the fur we had lost. We needed an external source of heat that we could control. We needed a piece of the sun to bring into the cave with us. And so, we tamed the monster. There is a moment in every survival story where the hero stops adapting to the environment and starts forcing the environment to adapt to them. For the naked ape, shivering in the Pleistocene dark, that moment came with the taming of the red flower. Fire! It is impossible to overstate how singular this is. Every other animal on Earth runs from fire. It is a universal signal of panic and death. But our ancestors, likely Homo erectus again, the heroes of our story, did the unthinkable. They walked toward the flames. They captured a smoldering branch from a lightning strike or a bushfire, fed it, protected it, and brought it home. By doing so, they created the world's first external heating system. This technology fundamentally changed the equation of our hairlessness. Before fire, losing your fur was a dangerous gamble that left you exposed to the biting cold of the night. But with a campfire, you could create a portable summer. You could sit in a cave in the middle of a freezing winter, feed a few logs into the hearth, and raise the ambient temperature to a balmy 80 degrees. You replaced the fur on your back with a pile of wood. Now, this brings us to a fascinating chicken or the egg debate that splits the archaeological community. Historians still argue whether we mastered fire before we lost our fur, or if we lost our fur and then frantically figured out fire to stop freezing to death. The cooking hypothesis, championed by primatologist Richard Wrangham, suggests the timeline is tight. He argues that the control of fire happened early, around 1.8 million years ago, coinciding with the emergence of Homo erectus. If this is true, fire might have been the enabler. It provided the warmth and the cooked food, which is easier to digest, that allowed us to shed our coats and grow our brains simultaneously. However, hard physical evidence is tricky. Ash blows away. Charcoal disintegrates. But at sites like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, Scientists have found traces of microscopic ash and burnt bone deep inside the cave, dating back 1 million years. This proves that we were bringing fire indoors, using it not just as a tool, but as furniture. Think about what this did to your nightly routine. Without fire, the night is a time of terror. You are blind. The predators, leopards, hyenas, saber-tooths, can see perfectly in the dark. You have to hide, be silent, and sleep with one eye open. But with fire, you push the darkness back. You create a circle of light that predators are afraid to cross. The flicker of flames mimics the movement of a living thing, and the smell of smoke triggers an instinctive fear response in big cats. You built a wall without lifting a stone. This safety allowed for a profound shift in human psychology. We could truly relax. We could enter deep sleep, REM sleep, more safely than any other primate. And in that safety, something else happened. The social hearth was born. Because we didn't have to go to sleep the moment the sun went down, our day was extended. We had 4 or 5 extra hours of light. What did we do with that time? We couldn't hunt. Too dark. We couldn't gather. So we sat. We looked at each other. We talked. The campfire became the first school, the first theatre, and the first parliament. It was where the elders told stories of the hunt, passing down knowledge to the next generation. It was where social bonds were forged not just through grooming, but through language. The warmth of the fire allowed us to sit still, naked and comfortable, and build the culture that would eventually define us. There is even a quirky biological theory that suggests our tolerance for smoke is a genetic adaptation. Most animals will flee from smoke long before the fire reaches them. Humans? We sit right in it. We have evolved enzymes in our livers specifically designed to process the toxins found in wood smoke. We are the only pyrophilic, fire-loving primate. So, in a very real sense, fire didn't just keep us warm, it cooked us into human beings. It allowed us to be naked without freezing, and it gave us the light to see the faces of our family as we told the first stories. But even with the fire roaring, there is a ghost in the machine. A tiny involuntary reaction that still happens to you today when the temperature drops or when the fire dies down. It is a reflex that serves absolutely no purpose for a hairless ape, yet your body insists on doing it. It's the ghost of the coat you left behind. Look at your arm right now. Rub an ice cube on it, or just think about a really spooky ghost story. Watch what happens. Little bumps rise up. The tiny, almost invisible hairs on your arm stand at attention. You get goosebumps. This is arguably the most useless reflex in the human body. It does absolutely nothing for you. It doesn't warm you up. It doesn't protect you. It doesn't make you stronger. It is a biological glitch, a 404 error message from your evolutionary history. This reaction is called piloerection. Pilo means hair, and erection means, well, to stand up. To understand why your body is wasting energy doing this, we have to look back at the ancestors we left behind in the jungle. For a furry mammal, piloerection is a survival superpower. Each hair follicle is attached to a tiny muscle called the erector pili. When the animal gets cold, these muscles contract, pulling the hair shaft upright. This fluffs up the coat. It increases the thickness of that trapped air layer we talked about earlier. It's like inflating a down jacket. The thicker the layer, the better the insulation. A cat, sitting in the snow with its fur puffed out, is using piloerection to stay toasty. But the reflex has a second function: defense. When an animal is threatened, when a dog sees a rival or a cat sees a cucumber, the adrenaline system kicks in and fires those same muscles. The fur stands up. This makes the animal look physically larger. It inflates their silhouette. To a predator, a puffed-up cat looks twice as big and twice as dangerous as a sleek one. It's a visual bluff. Now back to you. You are a naked ape. You have lost the thick coat. You have miniaturized the hairs into invisible peach fuzz. But nobody told your erector pili muscles. So when the cold wind hits you, your brain sends the ancient signal, deploy the insulation. The tiny muscles contract. The skin bunches up around the follicle. The microscopic vellus hairs stand up bravely. And nothing happens. There is no fur to trap the air. There is no coat to fluff. You just have bumpy skin. You are trying to inflate a jacket you are no longer wearing. And when you get scared, when you hear a noise in the basement, your brain screams, "Look big! Intimidate the threat!" The adrenaline hits, the muscles fire, and you just look like a slightly bumpy, naked ape. You haven't intimidated anyone. This is what scientists call a vestigial reflex. It is a leftover. It's like the appendix of your nervous system. It serves as irrefutable proof of our furry past. If we had never had fur, we would never have evolved the complex muscle machinery to lift it. But there is something poetic about it. Goosebumps are the one place where the old world and the new world collide. We still get them from cold, yes, but we also get them from something else. We get them from music, from a beautiful movie scene, from a moment of profound awe. We call these aesthetic chills, or frissons. Scientists are still debating why this happens, but the leading theory is that strong emotions trigger a dopamine flood that leaks into the stress response system. Your brain interprets the intensity of the emotion, even a positive one, as a high-stakes event, and it triggers the ancient fight-or-flight machinery. So when you listen to a soaring symphony and the hair stands up on your arms, you are experiencing a biological echo. It is your ancient animal brain trying to fluff up a coat you lost 1,000,000 years ago, reacting to the modern human beauty you just discovered. It's a reminder that beneath the clothes, the job, and the smartphone, you are still running on the operating system of a frightened mammal. Speaking of clothes, let's talk about that. Because eventually, shivering by the fire wasn't enough. As we pushed further into the frozen north, we realized that we had made a mistake. We had thrown away our coat, and now we needed it back. So we decided to steal one. So we had the fire. We had the huddle. But as humanity grew bolder and pushed further north, crossing into the frost-bitten landscapes of Europe and Asia, we hit a wall. Fire is great, but you can't wear a campfire. You can't wrap a flame around your shoulders and go hunting in a blizzard. To survive the Ice Age, the naked ape had to admit defeat. We had to acknowledge that biology had failed us. We needed insulation. We needed our fur back. But evolution is slow. Growing a new coat would take thousands of generations. We didn't have that kind of time. So we did what humans do best. We cheated. We looked at the animals around us, the bears, the wolves, the reindeer, who were perfectly comfortable in the snow. They had the technology we needed. So we killed them and took it. This is the dawn of the artificial fur. The invention of clothing is arguably the first true cyborg moment in human history. It was the first time we permanently augmented our bodies with an external component to extend our biological range. By draping the skin of a bear over our own shoulders, we were hacking our thermal limits. We were stealing the evolutionary work of another species and applying it to ourselves. At first, this was crude. Imagine a simple, heavy hide draped over the back, maybe tied with sinew. It was clumsy. It gaped at the sides, letting the wind in. It was heavy when wet. It was basically a portable rug. But then, the technology leaped forward. We didn't just drape. We started to tailor. The game changer was a tiny, overlooked tool found in the archaeological record, the awl. An awl is just a sharp, pointed spike made of bone or stone. It's not a weapon. You can't kill a mammoth with it, but you can use it to punch a precise hole in a tough leather hide. And if you can punch holes, you can thread sinew through them. You can stitch. This doesn't sound like much, but it is the difference between a cape and a parka. With the ability to sew, we could create complex clothing. We could make sleeves that fit the arm snugly to trap heat. We could make pants. We could make hoods. We essentially recreated the boundary layer of trapped air that our ancestors lost millions of years ago, but with one massive improvement. Ours was modular. If it got too hot, we could take the fur off. If it got cold, we could put it back on. We had achieved removable fur. This gave us a flexibility that no biological animal could match. A polar bear is stuck in its coat. If the temperature rises, it overheats. A human in a parka can unzip. But clothing became something more than just artificial thermoregulation. It became a canvas. Think about the psychology of it. For 1,000,000 years, your identity was your skin, your scars, your paint, your tattoos. Now, you are covering that up. You are presenting a new surface to the world. Suddenly, what you wore began to matter. Wearing the skin of a cave lion sent a very different message than wearing the skin of a rabbit. The artificial fur became the first symbol of status. It was the birth of fashion, not as a frivolity, but as a language. A complexly stitched garment with beads and dyed fur signaled that you had time, skill, and resources. It signaled that you were important. We started to decorate our new skins. We sewed ivory beads onto them. We dyed the leather with ochre. We turned survival gear into art. However, there is a frustrating problem for us looking back. Stone tools survive for millions of years. Bones fossilize. But leather? Fur? Sinew? They rot. They disappear. The archaeological record for the invention of clothing is almost non-existent. We have the needles and the scrapers, but we don't have the clothes themselves. We don't know exactly when this revolution happened. Did we start wearing clothes 40,000 years ago? 100,000 years ago? Without the physical evidence, we seemed stuck. The timeline of our second skin was a mystery lost to rot and decay. But then a group of geneticists realized something brilliant. We might not have the clothes, but we still have the passengers that lived in them. Remember those lice we talked about earlier? The ones we thought we had banished? It turns out they didn't just disappear. They evolved. And hidden inside the DNA of a tiny, itching louse is the precise date that humans put on their first shirt. Here is a sentence I never thought I'd say. We owe a massive debt of gratitude to the body louse. I know, it sounds ridiculous. Of all the creatures on Earth, the louse is probably the one we hate the most. It's a parasite, a nuisance, and a vector for disease. But in the grand detective story of human evolution, the louse is the star witness. It is the only reason we know when we started getting dressed. As we just discussed, clothes rot. Leather disintegrates. If you are an archaeologist looking for the first t-shirt, you are going to be searching forever. The physical evidence is gone, but biology remembers. Here is the brilliant realization that a team of geneticists had in the early 2000s. Lice are specialists. They are incredibly picky about where they live. In the human world, there are two main types of lice that plague us. First, there is the head louse, Pediculus humanus capitis. This is the classic schoolyard villain. It lives on the scalp, clings to hair shafts, and lays its eggs, nits, at the base of the hair. It has been with us since we were apes. It loves hair. Then, there is the body louse, Pediculus humanus corporis. This guy is different. Despite the name, the body louse doesn't actually live on the body. It lives in clothing. It hides in the seams of your shirt or the folds of your pants. It only crawls onto your skin for a quick blood meal, then retreats back to the safety of the fabric to lay its eggs. Here is the critical logic. Body lice cannot survive on a naked human. There is nowhere for them to hide, and their claws are adapted for gripping fabric fibers, not slippery skin. Therefore, the body louse could not have evolved until a new environment, clothing, existed. The body louse is a biological invention that was created by our invention of clothes. So, the geneticists did something clever. They used a molecular clock. DNA mutates at a fairly predictable rate. By comparing the DNA of the head louse and the body louse, scientists can count the number of genetic differences between them. By winding that clock backward, they can calculate exactly when the two populations split apart. They can pinpoint the moment when a group of head lice wandered down from the scalp, found a nice warm tunic, and decided to set up a new colony, eventually evolving into a separate subspecies. Getty Images. The answer they got was stunning. The genetic split occurred roughly 170,000 years ago. This number is massive. It changes everything we thought we knew about our history. Before this study, most anthropologists assumed clothing was a relatively recent invention, appearing maybe 40,000 years ago when we hit the freezing winters of Europe, the so-called Upper Paleolithic creative explosion. But the lice tell a different story. 170,000 years ago, humans were likely still in Africa. The Ice Age was happening, sure, but it wasn't the deep freeze of the north. This suggests that we started wearing clothes long before we met the woolly mammoth. Historians still argue whether this early clothing was for warmth during a cool climate spell in Africa, or if it was purely social, a way to display status or cover our nakedness as our cultures became more complex. But the timeline is clear. We were naked for over 1 million years, and then, right around the time our species, Homo sapiens, was really hitting its stride, we covered up. This date also lines up suspiciously well with another timeline. Remember the sweaty runner losing their fur around 1.2 million years ago, and the black skin evolving to protect us? Well, 170,000 years ago is roughly when humans started migrating out of Africa in successful waves. It seems that inventing the artificial skin of clothing was the final key that unlocked the rest of the planet. We could finally take our tropical bodies into temperate zones because we could bring our microclimate with us. So, the louse isn't just a pest. It is a living artifact. It is a tiny, six-legged historian that has been riding in our seams for thousands of millennia, recording the exact moment we decided that nakedness wasn't enough. But let's strip those clothes off again for a moment. Metaphorically, of course. We need to look at what happened to the skin underneath. When we lost our fur, we didn't just change our temperature regulation or our parasite load. We fundamentally changed the way we interact with the physical world. By removing the barrier between our nerves and the environment, we unlocked a new level of sensory perception. We tend to think of vision as the primary human sense, but the sensory revolution that happened on your skin might be just as important. You see, fur creates a numbness. It dulls the world. When a cat brushes against a wall, it feels the pressure through its hair, but it doesn't feel the texture. You, however, can feel the difference between silk and cotton. You can feel a breeze that is barely moving. You can feel the warmth of a hand hovering inches from your arm. This sensitivity wasn't an accident. It was the birth of a new kind of emotional language. Close your eyes for a second. Run your fingertips lightly over the back of your hand. You feel everything. The tiny ridges of your knuckles, the subtle texture of the skin, the warmth. Now, imagine doing that while wearing a thick woolen mitten. That is the difference between the world of the ape and the world of the human. When we shed our fur, we didn't just expose our skin to the sun. We exposed our nervous system to the world. We removed the mitten that had separated us from the physical environment for millions of years. This triggered what biologists call a sensory revolution. Underneath your skin, you have a vast network of nerve endings. Some tell you about pain, some about temperature, some about pressure. But there is a specific type of nerve fiber that is particularly fascinating in the context of our hairlessness. They are called C-tactile afferents, or seat fibers. These nerves are picky. They don't care if you poke them. They don't care about vibration. They are tuned to respond to one specific stimulus: slow, gentle stroking. Research shows that these nerves fire optimally when the skin is stroked at a speed of about 3 to 5 centimeters per second, which, not coincidentally, is exactly the speed at which a mother strokes a baby or lovers caress each other. In a furry animal, these nerves are buried deep. The fur intercepts the touch. A chimp grooming another chimp is interacting with the hair, picking through it. It's a mechanical process, but in a hairless human, the touch is direct. Skin to skin. When these CT fibers are activated, they bypass the sensory cortex, the part of the brain that says, "Something is touching me," and wire directly into the insular cortex, the part of the brain responsible for emotion and homeostasis. This is huge. It means that for humans, touch isn't just data. It's a drug. When you hug someone, or when a parent holds a child against their bare chest, this system floods the brain with oxytocin. This is the love hormone. It lowers cortisol, stress, reduces heart rate, and creates a profound sense of safety and bonding. We traded the social grooming of picking lice for the social grooming of caressing. We moved from cleaning to holding. This shift in tactile sensitivity likely rewired our entire social structure. Because our skin is so sensitive, we became more vulnerable to physical contact, but also more responsive to it. A comforting hand on the shoulder can de-escalate a fight. A gentle touch can signal alliance more powerfully than words. We became the hugging ape. But the revolution didn't stop at our fingertips. As the fur receded from our bodies, it also receded from our faces. And this unveiled a communication technology that is arguably more sophisticated than any smartphone: the human face. Now, I want you to look in the mirror again. Ignore the pores and the wrinkles for a second, and look at the sheer geography of your face. Compared to our primate cousins, you have a very strange mug. A chimpanzee has a hairless face, true, but it is framed by a thick hood of fur, and the skin is often dark, masking the subtleties of the shadows. A wolf's face is a stiff mask of fur. It can bare its teeth or perk its ears, but it can't do much else. Your face, however, is a high-definition screen. When we lost our fur, we didn't just strip the body. We unveiled the face. We removed the static. And in doing so, we turned the human head into the most sophisticated communication transmitter in the animal kingdom. Underneath that naked skin, you have roughly 43 distinct facial muscles. These muscles are weird. Most muscles in your body attach from bone to bone, like your bicep moving your forearm. But facial muscles attach from bone to skin, or even from skin to skin. When they contract, they don't move a limb. They pull the fabric of your face. Shutterstock. Because you have no fur to hide these movements, every single twitch is visible. You can communicate volumes without saying a word. A slight tightening of the lips, a flare of the nostrils, the tiny crinkle at the corner of the eye that distinguishes a fake smile from a real one, the Duchenne smile. We call these micro-expressions. They flash across your face in a fraction of a second, often involuntarily. Because our skin is naked, we can spot these signals from across the campfire. We became experts at reading each other. This was crucial for a species that was becoming intensely social. If you are living in a tight-knit group, relying on each other for hunting and protection, you need to know who is angry, who is lying, and who is scared before a fight breaks out. The naked face allowed for a constant, silent stream of emotional data. But we did keep two very specific patches of hair. And no, I don't mean the beard. We'll get to that later. I mean the eyebrows. Why on earth did we keep hairy caterpillars above our eyes? The old theory was that they stopped sweat from dripping into your eyeballs. And sure, they do that a little bit. But if you've ever worked out hard, you know that sweat goes right through them. The real reason is likely much more social. Eyebrows are punctuation marks. They are high contrast lines on a smooth canvas. Because they sit on a ridge of mobile skin, we can move them independently. We can raise them in surprise, furrow them in anger, or lift just one in skepticism. There is a universal human signal called the eyebrow flash. Anywhere you go in the world, from New York City to the remote highlands of New Guinea, if you see someone you recognize and like, you will instinctively raise your eyebrows for about 1/6 of a second. It is a biological hello. It signals recognition and lack of threat. Without those patches of contrasting hair against the naked forehead, this signal would be invisible at a distance. But the most spectacular, and frankly the most embarrassing, consequence of our naked face is a phenomenon that baffled Darwin to his dying day. Blushing. Humans are the only animal that blushes. It is a physiological oddity. When you feel shame, embarrassment, guilt, or intense attraction, your sympathetic nervous system triggers a rush of blood to the capillaries in your cheeks, neck, and chest. If you had fur, this would be pointless. A chimp might feel embarrassed, maybe, but you'd never know it because the skin reaction is hidden. But on a naked human, especially one with lighter skin adaptations, it is a bright red neon sign. Darwin called it the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. He couldn't figure out why natural selection would favor a trait that betrays you. Why would you want to advertise to the whole tribe that you messed up, or that you are lying, or that you feel socially awkward? Shouldn't evolution favor the poker face? The leading theory today is that blushing serves as an honest signal of apology. Imagine you accidentally break a social rule, you knock over the food, or you say something offensive. The tribe glares at you. Tensions rise. Violence is a possibility. But then you blush. You turn bright red. That color is a signal that you cannot fake. It tells the group, I know I messed up. I care about your opinion of me. I am suffering shame. It is a non-verbal apology. Studies show that people who blush after a mistake are forgiven faster and trusted more than those who don't. It signals that you are part of the moral order of the group. If we still had fur, we couldn't blush. We would lose this vital mechanism for de-escalating conflict. Our nakedness forces us to be transparent. It forces us to wear our hearts not on our sleeves, but on our cheeks. So we have a body that feels every touch, and a face that reveals every secret. We have become a species of intense sensitivity and openness. But there is a flip side to this openness. By stripping away our armor, we didn't just expose our emotions, we exposed our throats. We became physically soft. We became the squishiest thing on the savannah. And this physical fragility created a deep, haunting psychological scar that we still carry today. A fear that is woven into our very concept of being naked. I want you to try a thought experiment. Imagine you are walking through the African bush. You are alone. And because this is the theme of the night, you are completely naked. Suddenly, you hear a twig snap. Your heart stops. In that split second, you become acutely, painfully aware of exactly what you are. You are a soft, water-filled sack of protein wrapped in a casing that is about as durable as a wet paper towel. This is the psychological reality of being a naked ape. We are arguably the most physically vulnerable apex predators to ever walk the earth. Think about the competition. A leopard has a hide so loose and tough that if another cat bites it, it can literally turn around inside its own skin to bite back. A honey badger has skin so thick that machetes have been known to bounce off it. A crocodile is basically a tank. You? A stray thorn can tear you open. A slight drop-up in temperature can freeze you. A decent sunburn can incapacitate you. We have no claws to fight back, no fangs to tear flesh, and no armor to absorb a blow. If you get into a wrestling match with pretty much any wild animal larger than a beagle, you will lose, and you will lose messy. This profound physical fragility, this softness, didn't just change our bodies, it rewired our brains. It etched a deep, permanent scar of anxiety into the human psyche. Evolutionary psychologists argue that our lack of natural defenses is exactly what made us so paranoid. And in the wild, paranoia is a survival skill. Because we knew we were squishy, we became hyper-vigilant. We couldn't afford to be surprised. We couldn't afford to let the predator get close. We had to outthink the threat because we couldn't out-tank it. But more importantly, this vulnerability forced us to be nice to each other. If you are a solitary tiger with inch-thick skin, you can afford to be a jerk. You don't need friends. You are a walking weapon. But if you are a naked hominid, solitude is a death sentence. You need the tribe. You need someone to watch your back while you sleep. You need someone to help you scare off the lion. Our fragility was the engine of our cooperation. We traded individual armor for collective defense. We built a social immune system where the strength of the pack compensated for the softness of the individual. This brings us to one of the most universal human experiences, the naked nightmare. You know the one. You are at work, or at school, or giving a speech. You look down, and suddenly realize you forgot to put on clothes. You wake up sweating, heart pounding, filled with a deep, primal shame. Why is this dream so common? Across cultures, across ages, it is one of the top 5 most reported nightmares. Freud had some interesting ideas about it, mostly involving repressed desires, but modern evolutionary psychology offers a simpler explanation. The dream isn't about sex, it's about status and safety. For a human, clothes are not just thermal protection, they are social armor. They signal your rank, your competence, and your belonging to the tribe. To be suddenly naked is to be stripped of your social standing. It is to be revealed as the vulnerable, defenseless animal you really are. In the ancestral environment, if you were stripped of your status, you might be cast out. And if you were cast out, you died. The anxiety of the naked dream is the ghost of that ancient fear, the fear of losing the protection of the group and being left alone in the dark, soft, and shivering. Some historians and sociologists even argue about whether shame itself is an innate biological instinct or a learned cultural behavior. Did early humans feel shame about their nakedness before clothes were invented? The biblical story of Adam and Eve suggests that knowledge brings shame, but biologically, it's likely that shame evolved later, as a way to enforce the social rules of clothing. So the next time you feel vulnerable, remember that it's a feature, not a bug. Your feeling of exposure is what drove your ancestors to pick up a spear, build a fire, and make a friend. But we aren't completely naked, are we? As we scan down this hairless body of yours, we hit a few patches of dense, coarse forest that evolution mysteriously decided to leave behind. We kept the hair on our heads, we kept the eyebrows, and then we kept the hair in the places we usually try to hide. Why, in a body designed to dump heat and repel lice, did we keep thick, curly mats of hair in our armpits and our groins? We have reached the part of the human body that makes even the most serious anthropologists giggle nervously. We have spent the last 20 minutes talking about how we ruthlessly eliminated our fur to survive the heat and the parasites. We stripped our backs, our chests, our legs, and our faces. And yet, in the two areas of the body that are arguably the warmest, the darkest, and the most prone to friction, the armpits and the groin, we decided to keep a thick, curly, dense forest of hair. Biologically, this makes zero sense. If the goal was to cool down, these are the heat vents you'd want to uncover first. If the goal was hygiene, these are the dampest, bacteria-loving zones on the map. So why, in our sleek, aerodynamic design, did evolution leave these two patches of shag carpet? Welcome to the mystery of pubic and axillary hair. To solve this, we have to bring back an old character we dismissed earlier, the apocrine gland. Remember, back in the jungle, our ancestors were covered in these glands. They produced an oily, musky secretion. When we became the sweaty runners, we replaced most of them with the watery, cooling eccrine glands. But we didn't fire them all. We consolidated them. We retreated them into the bunker. Today, your apocrine glands are almost exclusively concentrated in your armpits and your groin. And, surprise, surprise, that is exactly where the hair is. This is not a coincidence. This is a design feature. The leading theory is that these patches of hair are scent traps. Think of your armpit hair as a pheromone diffuser. If your apocrine glands just secreted that oily musk onto bare skin, it would drip off or be wiped away. It wouldn't linger. But by secreting it into a dense mat of hair, you increase the surface area 1,000 times over. The oil coats the hairs. The bacteria on your skin, which actually create the smell by eating the oil, get a massive playground to work in. The heat of these enclosed areas cooks the scent, and the hair helps to waft it into the air when you move. In the animal kingdom, this is standard communication. It tells other humans about your stress levels, your immune system, and yes, your reproductive status. While we like to think we are visual creatures who choose partners based on their Tinder profile, our primitive brains are still sniffing the air. We are unconsciously reacting to the chemical cocktail wafting out of these hair patches. So, in a way, you never really stopped being a territorial animal marking your presence. You just concentrated the perfume into 2 specific dispensers. But there is a mechanical reason for this hair, too. It acts as a dry lubricant. Human locomotion is weird. We swing our arms when we walk. We grind our legs together. This creates a lot of skin-on-skin friction in the armpits and the groin. If you were completely hairless and sweaty in those areas, the skin would stick, rub, and chafe raw. Evolution's solution was to install a set of organic ball bearings. The hair in these regions is structurally different from the hair on your head. It is coarser, curlier, and flatter in cross-section. This texture creates a springy, resilient buffer. It prevents the skin folds from rubbing directly against each other during repetitive motion, like running for hours after an antelope, or gathering roots, or, well, other repetitive rhythmic activities that humans are fond of. It prevents chafing. It allows your limbs to glide past your torso without sticking. It is nature's anti-chafe stick. Then there is the third theory, the visual signal. Have you ever noticed when this hair arrives? A baby is born with hair on its head. It has the invisible Vellus hair on its body. But the armpits and the groin are bare. They stay bare for 10, maybe 12 years. Then puberty hits. Hormones flood the system. And suddenly, these patches explode into growth. This timing suggests that pubic and axillary hair serve as a visual flag for sexual maturity. In a tribe where everyone is running around naked, it is useful to know at a glance who is a child and who is a potential mate. It is a biological open-for-business sign. It's worth noting that humans are the only primates with thick pubic hair. A chimp has fur everywhere except the groin/genital region, which is usually bare. We did the exact opposite. We stripped the body and furred the groin. This reversal highlights just how important the signal must have been to our ancestors. Of course, there is a downside. Remember our friend the louse? When the head lice and body lice split up, a third player entered the game. The pubic louse, aka crabs. Interestingly, genetic studies show that the pubic louse is not related to the human head louse. It is actually related to the louse found on gorillas. This leads to the slightly uncomfortable conclusion that about 3 million years ago, our ancestors caught this parasite from gorillas, likely from sleeping in their abandoned nests or eating them. And because we had these isolated patches of coarse hair that resembled gorilla fur, the lice decided to stay. They colonized the islands of our groin and armpits, stranded by the ocean of bare skin in between. So you have these patches of hair to thank for your personal scent, your ability to run without chafing, and your susceptibility to gorilla parasites. But if pubic hair is a mystery, the hair on top of your head is an even bigger contradiction. Think about it. We lost our body hair to cool down. The head is the part of the body most exposed to the sun. It is the part that houses the heat-sensitive brain. Logic dictates it should be the first place to go bald. And yet, humans are the only primate that grows a massive, cascading, continuously growing mane of hair right on top of the radiator. We are the long-haired ape. Why did we keep the helmet? Here is the final baffling piece of the puzzle. We have spent the last hour convincing ourselves that we lost our fur to cool down our brains. We stripped our backs, our chests, and our arms to create a giant radiator to save the CPU from overheating. So why in the name of thermodynamics did we leave a thick, heavy, heat-trapping rug right on top of the CPU? The human head is the only place on the primate body that grows hair continuously, often for years, creating a mane that can reach down to the waist. In the animal kingdom, this is bizarre. A lion has a mane, but it stops growing at a certain length. A horse has a mane, but it's for protection. We have a mop that, if left uncut, becomes a massive curtain. This seems to violate everything we just learned. If the goal is to cool the brain, the scalp should be the first thing to go bald. It is the chimney of the body. Capping it with hair seems like a design flaw. But as always, evolution is smarter than we are. It turns out that head hair isn't a hat. It's a parasol. When you are standing upright on the equator at noon, the sun is directly overhead. The only part of your body that is perpendicular to those punishing rays is the top of your skull. Your body is in the shade of your head, but your head is taking 100% of the solar load. If your scalp were bald, that solar radiation would hit the skin directly. It would burn the scalp, damaging the sweat glands. But worse, it would heat the blood flowing just beneath the thin skin of the cranium. That hot blood would then flow directly into the brain, cooking it. Hair acts as a shield. It intercepts the photons before they hit the skin. But here is the cool physics part. It depends heavily on the texture of the hair. Anthropologists believe that the original human hair texture was tightly coiled, what we today call afro-textured hair. This texture is an engineering marvel of thermoregulation. Because the hair is coiled, it lifts away from the scalp. It creates a loft. It forms a thick, chaotic barrier that blocks the sun completely. But, and this is the genius part, it is full of air gaps. It is breathable. A bald head sweats, but the sun hits the sweat and heats it up. A head with straight, flat hair traps the sweat against the skin like a wet blanket. But a head with tightly coiled hair allows the air to flow through the hair structure. It blocks the radiation, but permits the wind to reach the scalp to evaporate the sweat. Recent experiments using thermal mannequins have proven this. A mannequin with tightly coiled hair keeps the brain temperature significantly lower than a naked mannequin, or one with straight hair under intense solar radiation. It is essentially a ventilated pith helmet made of keratin. So we kept the hair on our heads to stop our brains from frying. But that only explains why we have hair, not why it grows forever. Most animal fur has a set growth cycle. It grows for a few months, the anagen phase, rests, and then falls out, the telogen phase. That's why your dog sheds, but never needs a haircut. Humans, however, have a runaway anagen phase on our scalps. Our head hair can keep growing for 2 to 7 years before the follicle takes a break. This allows us to grow hair that is biologically unnecessary for sun protection. You only need an inch or two for the parasol effect. You don't need hair down to your butt. This brings us back to our old friend, sexual selection. Long, lustrous hair is incredibly expensive to maintain. It requires protein. It requires minerals. It requires a healthy immune system. If you are starving, or sick, or infested with parasites, your body shuts down hair production. Your hair becomes brittle, dull, or falls out. Therefore, a full head of long, shiny hair is a certificate of health. In the prehistoric dating market, long hair was a signal that said, "I have had surplus calories and good health for the last 5 years straight." It is a historical record of your metabolic success. By preferring mates with long hair, our ancestors pushed the genetic accelerator on the growth phase, giving us the unique human mane. Of course, once we left Africa and moved into colder climates, the function of head hair shifted again. It went from a sunshade to a winter hat. In the cold, you lose a massive amount of body heat through your head because of all that blood flow to the brain. Straighter, flatter hair, which traps heat better than the airy coils, became advantageous in Europe and Asia. So the hair on your head is a multi-tool. It's a heat shield, a winter cap, and a sexy billboard, all wrapped in one. But if head hair is confusing, facial hair is downright divisive. Look around. Half the human population has smooth faces. The other half has the capacity to grow a thick, bushy carpet on their chins. Why did evolution decide that men needed a scarf, but women didn't? What is the point of the beard? Let's talk about the beard in the room. We have established that losing our fur was a species-wide survival strategy. We all did it. Men, women, children, we all stripped down to survive the savannah. But then evolution did something unfair. It gave half the population a way to grow the fur back on their faces while leaving the other half permanently smooth. This is the puzzle of sexual dimorphism. In the animal kingdom, when males and females look drastically different, it's almost always because of sexual selection. The male lion has a mane, the female does not. The male peacock has the tail. The female is brown and sensible. The male deer has antlers. For humans, our antlers are beards. For centuries, people thought beards were for warmth. But that theory falls apart instantly when you ask a simple question. Do women not get cold? If a beard was a survival necessity for freezing winters, women would have them too. The fact that they don't suggests that the beard has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with testosterone. Let's look at the female side of the equation first. Why are women generally less hairy than men? The leading theory is neoteny. This is the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. In many species, humans included, youth is a powerful signal of fertility and health. Children are naturally hairless, smooth-skinned, and have large eyes. Evolutionary psychologists argue that over thousands of generations, males selected females who displayed these markers of youth. A hairless face and body became a proxy for young and fertile. This selection pressure polished the female form, driving it further towards the naked ideal than the male form. It's why, on average, women have lighter vellus hair and less terminal body hair. Now look at the men. Why the beard? If the female face is a signal of approachability and youth, the male beard is a signal of dominance and aggression. A beard does two main things visually. First, it hides the jawline. By covering the chin in a thick mat of hair, it artificially expands the lower face. It makes the jaw look wider, thicker, and more robust. In the primate world, a big jaw is a weapon. It signals biting power. Even if we don't bite anymore, the visual cue remains. I have a massive, dangerous face. Second, a beard is a direct readout of testosterone levels. You cannot grow a thick beard without high androgen levels. It is a chemical badge of rank. Interestingly, studies show that both men and women perceive bearded men as older, stronger, and more aggressive than clean-shaven men. In a confrontation between two males, the beard acts as an intimidation display. It says, "I am a mature, high-testosterone male. Back off." There is even a theory called the handicap principle. In a hand-to-hand fight, a long beard is actually a liability. It's a handle. An enemy can grab it and pull your head down. By growing a beard, a man is essentially saying, "I am so confident in my fighting ability that I am willing to give you a handle to grab, and I will still beat you." It is a swaggering display of confidence. So the gender divide in hair isn't accidental. It's a conversation. The smooth female face is whispering youth and fertility, while the bearded male face is shouting status and strength. But while we are busy analyzing our own chins, we often forget that we aren't the only ones who stripped down. We belong to a very exclusive club of mammals who decided that fur was overrated. And if you think our reasons were weird, wait until you meet the other members of the Naked Club. It's easy to feel special when you look in the mirror. We are the naked apes, the odd ones out, the hairless freaks of the primate family. But if you zoom out to the entire mammalia class, we actually have a few companions in the nude. We belong to a very exclusive, very strange club, the naked mammals. But here is the catch. While we all ended up with the same look, bald and smooth, we all did it for completely different reasons. And by comparing ourselves to them, we can see just how unique our own nakedness really is. First, meet the aquatic division. The whales, dolphins, walruses, and manatees. These guys lost their fur for the reason the aquatic ape theorists wished we did. Hydrodynamics. Fur is drag. If you are trying to swim at 30 miles per hour to catch a tuna, a shaggy coat is just a parachute slowing you down. Plus, as we discussed, wet fur is terrible insulation. So they traded the fur for blubber. Their nakedness is about speed and streamline. Next, meet the heavyweights. The elephants, rhinos, and hippos. These animals are massive. In physics, there is something called the square-cube law. As an animal gets bigger, its volume, and the heat it produces, grows much faster than its surface area, the skin that lets heat out. An elephant is basically a giant biological reactor that is constantly on the verge of overheating. If you put a fur coat on an elephant in the African sun, it would cook from the inside out. They lost their fur simply to dump the massive amount of heat generated by their sheer bulk. They are naked because they are too big to be fuzzy. Then, there is the weirdest member of the club, the naked mole rat. This little guy lives entirely underground in complex, ant-like colonies. The temperature in their burrows is stable and warm. They don't need fur for warmth because they never go outside. They don't need fur for sun protection because they live in the dark. In fact, fur would just get dirty and harbor parasites in their crowded tunnels. So they dropped it. Their nakedness is a result of living in a climate-controlled bunker. And then, there is us. We are not swimming in the ocean. We are not massive giants with thermal inertia problems. Well, most of us aren't. And we don't live in underground hives. We are the only animal on planet Earth that became naked for evaporative cooling on the run. This is our unique signature. An elephant cools down by wallowing in mud or flapping its ears. A hippo stays in the river. A whale relies on the cold ocean. But we cool down by leaking water onto our skin and letting the wind carry the heat away while we are in motion. We are the only sweaty, naked mammal. This distinction is crucial. It means our nakedness is an active, high-energy adaptation, not a passive one. We didn't lose our fur just to sit there. We lost it to move. We stripped down so we could conquer the open spaces during the hottest hours of the day. But there is a consequence to this uniqueness. Because we rely on sweat, and sweat relies on clean skin, we inadvertently changed our relationship with dirt. Most animals don't need to wash. A dog's coat is self-cleaning to a degree. The oils keep it healthy, and a good shake removes the dust. But human skin? Human skin is sticky. It accumulates salt from sweat, dust from the air, and oils from our glands. And if we cover that skin with clothes, we create a warm, damp breeding ground for bacteria. So by losing our fur, we didn't just become runners. We became cleaners. We had to invent hygiene. With our fur gone, you might think we solved the parasite problem forever. After all, that was one of the big selling points of going naked, right? No fur means nowhere for ticks and fleas to hide. And for a while, it worked. We were the cleanest apes on the block. We could spot a bug on our arm from a mile away and flick it off. We could wade into a river and wash the dust and sweat off our smooth skin in seconds. Compared to a matted, mud-caked chimp, we were practically sterile. But then we made a mistake. We reinvented the very thing we had evolved to escape. We invented clothes. By putting on layers of animal hides, furs, and later woven fabrics, we essentially built a parasite condominium right back on top of our skin. We created a dark, warm, humid environment that was protected from the sun and the wind. It was the perfect artificial fur. And the parasites noticed. Remember the body louse we talked about? The one that evolved specifically to live in our shirts? It didn't just bring the itch back. It brought death. Because body lice live in clothing and feed on human blood, they became the perfect vector for some of humanity's deadliest diseases. Typhus, for example, is a bacterial disease carried by lice. In the crowded, unwashed conditions of history, trenches, slums, prisons, typhus has killed more humans than almost any weapon ever invented. During Napoleon's retreat from Moscow, more French soldiers died of typhus, spread by the lice in their dirty uniforms, than died from Russian bullets. The plague, the Black Death, was spread by fleas. While rat fleas started it, human fleas and body lice helped move it from person to person in the terrified, huddled masses of medieval cities. So, in a cruel twist of irony, our hygienic nakedness led to the invention of clothing, which led to a hygiene crisis far worse than anything our furry ancestors ever faced. A chimp might get itchy, but it rarely gets a pandemic. This tug of war with our own biology has created a deep-seated obsession in the human psyche. The war on hair. Even today, when we have washing machines, hot showers, and soaps that can kill 99.9% of bacteria, we still act like hair is dirty. We have a multi-billion-dollar industry dedicated to scraping, plucking, burning and laser blasting the few remaining patches of hair off our bodies. Think about the razor. It is a tool of daily violence we inflict on ourselves. Why? Part of it is the old sexual selection signal we talked about. Smooth skin equals youth and health. But part of it is a lingering cultural memory of hygiene. In the ancient world, shaving was often a way to purify the body. Egyptian priests shaved their entire bodies, head, eyebrows, everything, to ensure they were pure enough to enter the temples. Roman soldiers shaved to prevent enemies from grabbing their beards, but also to look civilized compared to the hairy barbarians. We have internalized the idea that hairless means clean and civilized, while hairy means wild and dirty. We are still fighting the ghost of the parasite, trying to scrub away the last remnants of the animal we used to be. But this war on hair isn't just about hygiene. It's about identity. Because once we lost our natural coat, hair became the only part of our body we could truly customize. Hair is a paradox. Biologically, it is dead protein pushing out of your scalp. But culturally, it is the most alive, volatile, and dangerous substance on your body. Because we lost our fur, the hair we have left became precious. It became the only part of our physical form that we could shape, cut, dye, and style without surgery. It became our primary signal of who we are. Think about the story of Samson in the Bible. It's one of the oldest superhero stories we have. Samson is invincible, a man of godlike strength who can tear lions apart with his bare hands. But his power isn't in his muscles, it's in his hair. The moment Delilah cuts his hair, he becomes weak. He becomes like any other man. This isn't just a fairy tale. It's a deep cultural archetype. Across history, long, uncut hair has often been a symbol of wild, untamed power. The Merovingian kings of early France were known as the long-haired kings. If a king was deposed, they didn't just take his crown, they shaved his head. To cut the hair was to castrate the power. The Vikings, the Spartans, the samurai, warrior cultures often held hair in almost religious reverence. But flip the coin. If long hair is power, what is a shaved head? Historically, the shaved head is the symbol of the slave, the prisoner, or the recruit. When you join the military, what is the first thing they do? They buzz your hair off. When a prisoner enters jail, they shave him. Why? It's not just for lice anymore. It is a ritual of submission. By removing your individual crown, your unique style, the institution is stripping away your ego. They are turning you from an individual into a unit. You are being civilized by force. But there is a voluntary version of this too. Monks, priests, and ascetics across the world, from Buddhist temples in Tibet to Christian monasteries in Europe, shave their heads willingly. This is tonsure. It signals a renunciation of the world. It says, I am not playing the mating game anymore. I don't care about vanity or sexual selection. I am opting out. This tension between the hairy and the smooth has shaped entire civilizations. Look at the Romans. For a long time, the Roman ideal was the clean-shaven face and the short, controlled haircut. Why? Because the people they were fighting, the Celts, the Germans, the Gauls, were hairy. They had long, matted hair and big beards. To a Roman, hairy meant barbarian. It meant animalistic, chaotic, and dangerous. Smooth meant disciplined, rational, and Roman. There is a fantastic historical anecdote about Peter the Great, the Tsar of Russia in the late 1600s. He wanted to modernize Russia and make it more like Western Europe. So what did he do? He declared war on beards. He literally instituted a beard tax. If you wanted to keep your beard, you had to pay the government a hefty fee and carry a special beard token, a copper coin that said, "The beard is a useless burden." Police would stand at the city gates and forcibly shave anyone who couldn't pay. He understood that to change the culture, he had to change the hair. Historians and folklorists still argue about the origins of the wild man figure that appears in almost every culture's mythology. The hairy giant who lives in the woods, Bigfoot, the Yeti, the Woodwoes. Some scholars suggest this isn't just imagination. It might be a cultural fossil, a collective memory of a time when we shared the landscape with other, hairier hominids like Neanderthals or Gigantopithecus. To the naked Homo sapiens, these hairy cousins represented the wild nature we had left behind. Even today, we use hair to signal our tribal allegiance. The mohawk of the punk rocker, the long hair of the 60s hippie, the sharp part of the businessman. We are constantly broadcasting our politics, our music taste, and our rebellion through the dead protein on our heads. So we are the naked ape, yes, but we are also the styled ape. We use our remaining patches of fur to tell the world which tribe we belong to. But what if we are approaching the end of the line? We have lost the body fur. We are losing the wisdom teeth. Our jaws are getting smaller. Evolution hasn't stopped. It's just moving too slow for us to see. Are we destined to lose it all? Is the future of humanity completely bald? Evolution is a slow, patient sculptor. It doesn't work with a chisel, it works with sandpaper. It gradually smooths away the rough edges, erasing the features that are no longer necessary. And if you look closely at the modern human body, you can see the dust flying. We are not a finished product. We are a work in progress. We are actively losing parts. Take your wisdom teeth, for example. For our ancestors, who spent their days chewing tough roots and raw meat, those extra molars were essential. But since we started cooking our food and inventing forks, our jaws have been getting smaller. There is no room left in the garage. As a result, about 35% of people today are born without wisdom teeth. The genetic code is simply deleting them. Or look at your forearm. Squeeze your pinky and thumb together and flex your wrist. Do you see a tendon pop up in the middle? That's the palmaris longus muscle. It was great for hanging from trees. But about 14% of you won't see anything. You don't have it. You don't need it. Evolution has scrapped it. So the big question is our hair next on the chopping block? We are already the naked ape. But are we destined to become the totally naked ape? If you look at the prevalence of hair loss, specifically androgenetic alopecia, or male-female pattern baldness, it's hard to argue that hair is a priority for our species anymore. Roughly 50% of men will experience significant hair loss by age 50. While we currently treat this as a cosmetic disaster, fueling a billion-dollar industry of transplants and creams, an evolutionary biologist might look at it differently. In the wild, if a trait is bad for survival, natural selection ruthlessly weeds it out. If balding made you die young or stopped you from finding a mate, the genes for balding would have disappeared thousands of years ago. But they haven't. They are thriving. This suggests that, at best, hair is biologically neutral. It doesn't matter if you have it or not. We have reached a point where our survival is no longer dictated by the protein filaments growing out of our skin. At worst, or perhaps at most advanced, balding might be the next step. Consider the environment we live in today. We have completely conquered the climate. We spend 90% of our lives inside climate-controlled boxes, houses, cars, offices, kept at a constant 72 degrees. When we go outside, we wear high-tech fabrics, Gore-Tex, polyester, merino wool, that are infinitely better at thermoregulation than human hair ever was. We have hats for the sun. We have helmets for protection. We have successfully outsourced the job of our hair to technology. Biologically, growing hair is expensive. It requires a constant supply of protein, iron, zinc, and cellular energy. In a world where we no longer need that biological insulation, those resources could be better spent elsewhere, maybe on repairing DNA or fueling our ever-demanding immune systems in crowded cities. There is a condition called alopecia universalis, where a person loses every single hair on their body. No eyebrows, no lashes, no nothing. Biologically, these people are perfectly healthy. They live normal, long lives. They are not at a survival disadvantage in the modern world. This proves that we have officially entered the post-hair era of our evolution. It's fascinating to look at how science fiction imagines the future of humanity. When we picture highly evolved beings, whether it's the classic grey alien or the humans of the far future in movies, they are almost always bald. They have massive heads, big brains, and tiny, smooth, hairless bodies. This is our intuitive understanding of our own trajectory. We instinctively feel that as we become more cerebral, more technological, and more separated from the wild, we will shed the last remnants of our animal nature. The fur will go, the hair will go. We will become pure intellect housed in a sleek, synthetic shell. Of course, there is one thing holding this back: sexual selection. As long as we find hair attractive, as long as we swipe right on the person with the nice flow or the good beard, we will keep the genes in the pool. We are essentially keeping our hair as a pet. We are breeding ourselves for a trait that is functionally obsolete just because we like how it looks. But fashion is fickle. Culture changes. If the beauty standard shifts, if a smooth look becomes the ultimate symbol of futuristic status, then the sandpaper of evolution might start moving faster. We might finish the job we started on the savannah 6 million years ago. We might finally take off the hat. So here we are at the end of the line. We have traveled 6 million years from the deep shade of the Miocene jungle to the climate-controlled comfort of your bedroom. And if there is one thing I want you to take away from this journey, it's that your nakedness is not an accident. It is not a defect. It is the most expensive, dangerous, and brilliant purchase your ancestors ever made. Think about the trade. To become who you are, you had to give up everything that kept you safe. You gave up the thick, comforting fur that protected you from the thorns and the cold. You gave up the camouflage that hid you from the leopard. You gave up the simple, unthinking life of the ape. In exchange, you got a body that is fundamentally exposed. You became a soft, fragile creature, prone to sunburn, freezing and bleeding. You became a water-leaking machine that has to drink constantly to stay alive. You became a creature that blushes when it lies and shivers when it's lonely. By all conventional logic, you should have gone extinct. A naked ape on the savannah is a bad idea. But look at what that vulnerability bought you. Because you were naked, you could run. You could hunt in the heat that paralyzed the rest of the animal kingdom. You could fuel a brain that was hungry and hot, a brain that grew large enough to understand the stars and split the atom. Because you were naked, you had to invent. The cold forced you to master fire. The exposure forced you to create clothes. The fragility forced you to craft tools. You didn't just adapt to the world. You started building your own world on top of it. Your nakedness was the mother of all invention. And perhaps most importantly, because you were naked, you had to connect. You lost the rough, impersonal grooming of the fur and gained the sensitive, oxytocin-fueled touch of the skin. You became a species that needed warmth, that needed the huddle, that needed the tribe. Your physical softness forced you to develop social strength. It made you empathetic. It made you human. So the next time you step out of the shower and catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror, that pale or dark, smooth, slightly bumpy, mostly hairless creature, don't look at your flaws. Don't worry about the receding hairline or the weird patch of fuzz on your shoulder. Look at the scar of your survival. You are wearing the uniform of the most audacious evolutionary experiment in history. You are the ape that dared to take off its armor and walk into the fire. And against all odds, you didn't just survive. You won. You are the naked ape. And you are magnificent. And now the journey is over. The time machine is slowing down, bringing us gently back from the dusty plains of the Pleistocene, back from the flicker of the first campfires, back to the safety of right now. Let the image of the burning sun fade from your mind. The heat is gone. The long run is finished. You don't need to chase anything anymore. You don't need to hunt, or gather, or scan the horizon for predators. You are safe. Feel the space around you. The air is still and cool. You are protected by walls that keep the wind away, by blankets that replace the fur we lost so long ago. You are warm. You are comfortable. Take a deep breath, and as you let it out, feel the tension draining from your shoulders, from your neck, from your jaw. Let your muscles soften. Your body knows it doesn't need to be vigilant anymore. It can let go. Think about that journey we took, the millions of years of struggle, the endless adaptations, all leading to this single moment of peace. Your ancestors ran so you could rest. They faced the cold so you could be warm. They survived the darkness so you could close your eyes without fear. Let your breathing settle into a slow, easy rhythm. In and out. Like the tide. Like the gentle rustle of wind through the trees. The world is quiet. The history is written. The only thing left to do is drift. Drift away from the science, away from the logic, into the soft, velvet darkness of sleep. You are perfectly designed for this rest. You are safe in your skin. Good night.